Chapter 360. Jiangcheng Media University was also on holiday. Yang Yi also gave the employees in the shop a holiday so that Ding Xiang could go back to Miao Village earlier to see her grandmother. He also allowed Lin Mu and Ran Jin to go back to Guangdong province for the new year. They were originally from the same hometown and were high school classmates. However, Lin Mu was a little apologetic. He held the red packet that Yang Yi gave him in his hand and said hesitantly, "Brother Yang, I've only been working here for a few days. I'm already getting my salary and red packet. Am I embarrassed? Why don't I work for you for a few more days? Anyway, it's still early before the new year. Ran Jin and I can go back 2 days later." Ding Xiang also nodded and said, "Brother Yang, let me stay too. Huan can't handle it alone. Don't join in the fun. Go home quickly. You've saved a semester's worth of money. It's time to take your grandmother down the mountain to see a doctor." Yang Yi smiled and said to Ding Xiang, "Don't worry about me. Anyway, it's the holiday and there aren't many people. Besides, I'm going back to my hometown and the coffee shop is also on holiday. We'll talk about it when I come back during the new year." Ding Xiang blushed and nodded embarrassedly when her desire was pointed out. Yang Yi then turned to look at Lin Mu and then said with a smile, "Xiao Lin, you should go back early. You have a long journey. It's not easy to buy a ticket if you're late. It's fine if you're alone, but you can't always let your girlfriend accommodate you, right?" "Okay. Thank you, Brother Yang. After the new year, I'll come back to work early," Lin Mu said gratefully. Since Yang Yi had said so, he didn't insist and said to Yang Yi gratefully. After Lin Mu left, Yang Yi waved his hand and said, "Shishi, bring those things over." "Which ones?" Shishi was sitting in the booth, playing with the 3 British shorthairs that were huddling around her for warmth. When she heard her father's voice, she turned her head and said crisply, "Papa, which ones?" "Bring them all over." Yang Yi looked at her with a smile. The little girl was very diligent. She patted Xiao Guai's head, then jumped down and picked up the 2 bags from the opposite seat. She ran all the way to her father's side with Feng Er. Then she raised her little head and smiled sweetly, asking for praise. "Papa, look, it's not heavy at all. I can pick it up with one hand. That's because our Shishi is very strong. She's very good." Yang Yi rubbed Shishi's hair and praised her. He took the things and put them on the bar counter. He said to Ding Xiang, "Ding Xiang, take these 2 bags back to your grandmother to nourish her body. This bag is donkey hide gelatin, which can replenish blood. This bag is wild ginseng, but it's not very old. These days, it's not easy to buy old ginseng, but the effect should be okay. Take it back, cut it into thin slices, soak it in boiling water and give it to your grandmother to drink. It has the effect of prolonging life. Of course, it's best to buy an old hen to stew it." Although Yang Yi said it casually, since he was going to give it to her, he naturally wouldn't buy some defective products. These 2 bags were selected from the good things he had bought with Lance Hao Kai when he was preparing for the New Year's goods. They were very expensive. But let's not talk about the money. Yang Yi felt that Ding Xiang had helped him a lot this semester. Basically, he didn't need to worry about the coffee shop, so he had to give Ding Xiang an extra reward. Since he had already given the money, Yang Yi felt that it was meaningless to give more money. It was better to buy some tonics for her grandmother. It was also a kind of care for the employee's family. "How can this be? Brother Yang, you've given me enough. I can't ask for more." Ding Xiang hurriedly waved her hand. "This is for your grandmother, not for you." Yang Yi waved his hand and said, "Hurry up and take it." "Sister Ding Xiang, are you going home too? My papa bought a lot of things for my grandfather and my grandmother. You want to buy some too?" Shishi innocently chimed in. These days she had seen Yang Yi's preparations. Although the little girl couldn't say it out loud, she accepted some filial piety in a daze. Yang Yi smiled. He patted his daughter's back, then put his hand on her small shoulder and said to Ding Xiang, "Look, even Shishi persuaded you to bring some things back when you go home to visit your grandmother. With these 2 bags, you don't have to buy any more." Ding Xiang finally accepted it after Yang Huan persuaded her. However, she was so touched that her eyes turned red. If it weren't for the fact that she rarely cried and wasn't a sentimental girl, she might have been moved to tears. On Tianmei's side, Mo Fei had just finished the 1-month publicity period. When she returned to the company, Neo Miling called her over with a smile. "Mo Fei, let me tell you a piece of good news. CCTV invited you to participate in the Spring Festival program." Spring Festival Gala? Didn't they already confirm the list of performances? Murphy asked with some confusion. "But I don't have time during the Spring Festival. Sister Ling, I asked Xiaowan to tell the company that I will take a 2-week break from work in February, which is around the Spring Festival. You're going back to your parents' place for the holidays." Neo Miling frowned. "Don't even think about the Spring Festival Gala. I'm talking about 7 days of Spring Festival. If you really don't have time, then forget it. It's not a particularly important program." If it were someone else, Neo Miling would definitely be dissatisfied. How could an artist not follow the company's arrangements? But Mo Fei was different. The current Mo Fei had returned to the peak with another platinum album, and she was in the limelight for a while. Neo Miling even regarded Mo Fei as the golden brand of Tianmei, and she would talk about her everywhere she went. Now that Murphy said that she wanted to take a 2-week break, and it was the Spring Festival, how could Neo Miling argue with Murphy over such a reasonable request? What's more, she didn't have the confidence to face Murphy, who asked her to be tricked by her nephew. Even though she and Murphy tacitly chose not to mention it, Neo Miling still felt that something was wrong. It's the Spring Festival. Murphy wasn't good at lying, but she didn't want to tell Neo Miling where she was going during the Spring Festival, so she nodded vaguely. "Then there's no problem with the arrangements after the Spring Festival, right?" "Oh right, there's a new schedule. Jixin interview. Would like to invite you on the program again. You had an agreement with Luo Xian before, but the time is set to the 21st of February. If you agree, I'll get someone to cancel your other schedule for that day." Neo Miling smiled. "Sister Luo Xian? That's fine." Murphy nodded without hesitation. Neo Miling laughed heartily, then pretended to be concerned and said, "That's good. Oh right, you have to take care of your body when you're abroad for the Spring Festival, especially your voice. When you come back, the company has prepared 3 concerts for you." Tianmei's resources couldn't be compared to those record companies. For example, Chen Yijia's Tianxiang had arranged a nationwide concert tour. Tianmei, on the other hand, was able to arrange 3 concerts in several major cities. It wasn't easy. Who asked Neo Miling to not let others earn her money? If they worked with other companies, with Murphy's achievements, they might be able to arrange 10 concerts. There was no need for a nationwide concert tour, as Murphy's popularity was still lacking. However, Murphy seemed to be a little absent-minded today. Even when they talked about the concert, she only nodded, then said a few polite words to Neo Miling before leaving in a hurry. She wasn't in a hurry to go home, and Mo Xiaowan brought her to her in Xiao Ai's place. The 3 women were of the same caliber, and they gathered together to discuss how to quickly let Murphy learn the basic cooking skills in a few days. Cooking, cutting, and frying. Chapter 361. In the evening, Murphy returned home. Her face was a little dark, and she seemed to be emitting smoke. Yang Yi didn't think too much about it. He just asked curiously, "Mo Xiaowan, don't you close the window when you drive? Before the new year, firecrackers are probably being set off everywhere. Look at you. You look like you just got up from the battlefield." He also got some hot water for Murphy and a towel to wipe her face. Murphy was a little guilty, so she hurriedly covered up by wiping her face. She was afraid that Yang Yi would ask her what she did in the afternoon. She didn't know how to lie, so she might tell the truth. "Well, Yang Yi, when will we go back to your house?" Murphy asked nervously. "I've already arranged my work. I can leave at any time." Yang Yi knew that Murphy was under a lot of pressure when she kept asking about the situation at home. He patted Murphy's back gently and said with a smile, "In a few days, after I buy everything, we'll drive back with Yang Huan. You should have a good rest. You've been tired for a month. And don't be too nervous. My parents won't eat you." He also made a little joke, wanting to let Mo Fei feel his confidence. However, even Yang Yi himself had no idea. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gone around buying so many things. He even made a long list of things to bring back. "Eat you? Is there a big bad wolf again?" She, who had just helped her mother carry the coat to the bedroom, came out. She happened to hear half of her father's words. The little girl immediately straightened her little chest and said with a sense of justice, "Papa, I'm not afraid of the big bad wolf. I'm a hunter." After that, she ran back to the bedroom. When she came out again, the little girl was already holding a long toy gun and running out coolly. "Papa, look, I'm a hunter." She grabbed the gun with both hands and pretended to shoot. Her posture was not very standard. Although she was trying to scare the big bad wolf and had a serious attitude, it was still not enough to scare the big bad wolf. However, it was possible to make the big bad wolf look like a husky. This toy gun was actually bought by Yang Yi for a relative's child. She saw it and took it for herself. When Yang Yi told Murphy about this matter, Murphy complained that he had raised her daughter from an obedient girl to a tough girl who wielded a sword and wielded a gun. Yang Yi's attention was diverted. He couldn't help but laugh. "Aren't you Little Red Riding Hood? How did you become a hunter?" "I am also Little Red Riding Hood. But I also like hunters because hunters can defeat big bad wolves." She hugged the toy gun and explained earnestly. In the evening, while Yang Yi was writing in the study, Murphy and Shi, who had just taken a bath, were talking in the bedroom. "Mom, you come in too. It's comfortable here." She got into the quilt and covered her head. Then she twisted her body and stuck her head out, revealing a pair of big eyes, and said in a muffled voice. The little girl was very excited as she hadn't slept with her mother for a long time. Murphy lifted the quilt and sat beside her daughter. The little girl naughtily put her right leg on her mother's body. Murphy didn't care about the little girl's rude behavior, because she had something to tell Shi. She turned her body slightly and rested her head on her arm. Looking at the little girl's side face, she asked softly, "Shi, in a few days, we will go back to Grandpa and Grandma's home. Are you nervous?" Shi turned her head and looked at her mother, who was smiling. She didn't know why she was so happy. She answered casually, "No, why?" "Because it's the first time you go to Grandpa and Grandma's home and meet them. You don't even know them. We don't even know if they will like us." Murphy inadvertently revealed a trace of sadness. "Mom, are Grandpa and Grandma the same as Grandpa?" She was a little bored. She stuck her little head out of the quilt and pushed the quilt away with her arm. She pressed it against her stomach and asked curiously. Murphy was a little helpless. She could only explain to her. "Grandpa and Grandma are your papa's papa and mom. In English, they are also Grandpa and Grandma. But for Mom's papa and mom, you should call them Grandpa and Grandma in China. Do you understand?" Shi nodded in confusion. Shi, Mom needs you to do Mom a small favor." Murphy didn't want to beat around the bush anymore. Otherwise, she would be completely led astray by Shi. "Okay. I like to help others. Helping others is a good child." Shi recited the words of the kindergarten teacher. "But Mom, wait a minute." Cece pushed the quilt down with all her might, and then stretched out her little feet. She was probably too excited, and her whole body was hot. She rubbed her feet against the cool back of the quilt before smiling in satisfaction. "No, you have to cover yourself with the quilt. You will catch a cold later." Murphy couldn't spoil her. After a while, Shi was finally willing to cover her stomach with a corner of the quilt. Her feet were still exposed. "Shi, when we go back to Grandpa and Grandma's home, you have to talk to them more, okay?" Murphy said softly. "Okay. What do I have to talk to them about?" Shi asked curiously. "You have to introduce yourself to them. Then you have to tell them about the things that happened at home and in kindergarten. You have to pick some interesting things to tell them." Murphy didn't actually want Shi to say anything. She just thought of what Yang Huan said to her before, and felt that it might be easier for Shi to please the elders. "Then can I tell them about my good friends?" Shi counted on her fingers and looked at the ceiling. She said while thinking, "I have a lot of good friends. Xian Er, Chi and Shiyin Jiaoyu." "Okay, you can tell them all." Murphy nodded. She suddenly thought of something. Her eyes lit up, and she turned around and said, Then, can I tell Grandpa and Grandma that I wish them good fortune and red packets? Auntie said that we have a lot of relatives, and I can ask for a lot of red packets." Thinking of this, Shi felt that she was going to be overjoyed. Although she only understood the meaning of money in the past year, the joy of red packets had nothing to do with money for Shishi in the past. However, Shishi didn't get many red packets in the past. She didn't enjoy them when she was abroad. Only her grandpa, grandma, and mother gave her red packets. Well, okay, but you have to pay attention to your etiquette. You can't ask grandpa and grandma for a red envelope as soon as you come here. You have to build a good relationship with them first, and then you can get the red envelope. Don't look at how much money is in it. Once you get it, give it to mom, and mom will help you put it in your piggy bank. She didn't want Shishi's money, but she was worried that Shishi would care about the money in it. Murphy could guess that there wouldn't be much money in it, but if Shishi said it rashly, it would cause others to be unhappy. Shishi's words also reminded Murphy that she had to prepare a lot of red packets and give them to the children during the spring festival. She couldn't be too stingy. Okay then. But mom, you have to help me put it in. You can't take mine. Shishi hesitated and said with some worry. Well, anyway, Shishi, if your grandpa and grandma are unhappy because mom or papa did something wrong, you must run up to them quickly and coax them. Tell them, Grandpa, Grandma, don't be unhappy, okay? Then find a way to talk to them. Murphy continued to exhort. I got it. Shishi felt cold again. She rolled into the bed, squeezed into her mother's arms, and then said with a smile. She was still happy that she could get a lot of red packets. Chapter 362. Wadayaku Village, Jui Town of Pagwa County, was a very ordinary village. It was located in a valley formed by two mountain ranges. The scenery was beautiful, but the traffic was not smooth. In the early years, it was isolated from the rest of the world. 20 years ago, the county built a road that passed through Wadayaku, and this small village had the opportunity to see the world. On this day, the sun was setting in the west. The red rays of the sun were like the claws of the devil, contrasting with the mottled clouds. It had a unique beauty. Yangqing did not know how to appreciate it. He wore a cotton-padded jacket and carried a hoe as he walked home. He simply and honestly greeted his neighbors. Qingzi, when are you going to hold your wedding? Someone asked jokingly. It's still early, still early. Yangqing scratched his head and smiled embarrassedly. After he left, a few women who had finished preparing dinner gathered together and muttered, Sigh, old Yang's family is rich now. They bought cows and pigs and built a big house. Who said not? If I had known, I would have introduced my daughter to Qingzi. Now that person from another village is taking advantage of us. Qingzi is a good person and capable. I have long thought that he is a talent. I told you, but you didn't believe me. But that girl from another village seems to be a girl from Zheng village. I heard that she is quite beautiful. The rich one is old Yang's eldest son. He sent the money back. Otherwise, with Yang Chongguei and Yangqing's farming skills, how could they earn so much money? Sai, I heard from you, or that her eldest son is not married yet. Sister-in-law, your daughter should also hurry up. While they were gossiping, Yangqing had just returned home. His house was a 4-story building that had just been repaired. Compared to the surrounding 2-story buildings, most of them were only 1-story buildings. Most of them were only 1-story, old-fashioned buildings. It was like a crane in a flock of chickens. No wonder those women felt that old Yang's family had become rich. Not to mention Wadayaku village, even in the nearby Zheng family village, it was rare to see a family with the money to build a 4-story bungalow. There were some in town, but they were all along the main roads. When Yangqing came back, it just so happened that a woman in her 50s walked out of the hall with a smile on her face. Qingzi, you are back? The woman's voice was very loud. Mrs. Migu, you are here? Why don't you stay for a while? Yangqing was stunned when he saw this person, but he still greeted her politely. After that person left, he frowned and put the hoe near the cow pen, then walked into the hall. Yang Chongguei, Yang Yi, Yangqing, and Yang Huan's father, was in his 60s or 70s. His hair was white, but his body was still very strong. His eyes were bright and full of spirit. And he was sitting. And drinking. He was sitting. The layout of the Yang family's hall was very particular. It was very similar to those ancient families on TV. In the middle were 2 armchairs, one on the left and one on the right. In the middle was a square table, and on both sides were 2 rows of chairs with flower vases in between. They were slightly shorter than the armchairs. The chairs were not antiques or expensive furniture. The chairs were all made of wood. There was an inexhaustible supply of materials in the mountains, and the craftsmen in the village had helped to make them. The vase was even cheaper. If one looked closely, one could see that the patterns on the vase were not complete. The vase was crooked and cracked. It was a defective product sold in the town's market, but it did not affect the quality of the vase. Yangqing saw that his mother was tidying up the guests' teacups, peeled peanut shells, and candy wrappers. He quickly went to help. "Mom, isn't that Mrs. Migu? The one who introduced me to Shuyi?" To put it bluntly, she was a matchmaker. Yes. Dong Yu smiled and let her son tidy up. Dong Yu was in her 50s. Compared to Yang Chongwei, she looked much younger. She was kind and not as fierce as Yang Chongwei. "Don't I have Shuyi? Why is she still here?" Yang Qing frowned and asked puzzledly. "Mom, we can't do anything to let Shuyi down." Yang Qing tidied up the things and poured a cup of water for himself. He would wash the cup after he finished speaking. Yang Chongwei did not say a word and continued to drink his tea. The old man had a quiet personality. "Who said that I asked Migu to come over to introduce you to someone?" Dong Yu smiled and said, "I was worried about Tizi. Isn't he coming back for the spring festival this year? I wanted to introduce him to someone and see if he would like her." Yang Qing spat out the water he was drinking. Yang Chongwei frowned and said, "How old are you? Why are you still so impatient?" The old man's voice was like a bell. Every word revealed an awe-inspiring majesty that could not be refuted. Yang Qing did not dare to. He nodded submissively and quickly wiped the water he spat out on the table. "Mom, you don't have to introduce someone to Big Brother." Yang Qing whispered to his mother. "Why? He has someone outside?" Dong Yu's reaction was very sharp. She immediately caught Yang Qing's flaw. Cough, cough. Anyway, Big Brother didn't come back alone this time. Other than Huan Huan, there was someone else. Yang Qing said vaguely. He had already revealed the secret, but he did not say whether Yang Yi brought one person or 2. Normal people would not think of the 2. And Dong Yu was the same. She was happy. "Qing, you're saying that your big brother came back this time to bring someone home?" Yang Chongwei also raised his head and looked at Yang Qing. "Yes." Yang Qing nodded hesitantly. "Hey, why didn't this child say it earlier? He was still hiding it." Dong Yu was gratified and complained. "He brought someone home. Hey, if it weren't for you, Qing, I would have introduced another person to him. That would have spoiled everything. No, I have to push Migu away later. Hey, by the way, Qing, how does your big brother's girlfriend look? Is she good looking? Is she tall enough? Where is she from?" Dong Yu asked. "How would I know? I haven't seen her before. Big brother will know when he comes back. It's only a matter of 2 days." Yang Qing scratched his head. "Then I have to hurry and buy more meat and fish in town. It's her first time coming to our house. We can't be too shabby." Dong Yu was excited. The next day in Jiangcheng, Yang Yi moved boxes of things into Tyrannical Wolf's cargo compartment. Yang Huan and Murphy were also helping. They bought a lot of things. Even the cargo compartment of the pickup truck was full. "Yang Yi, I forgot about these. I bought clothes for your parents." Murphy ran down with a few bags of clothes when Yang Yi started to tie the nylon rope. "What clothes?" Yang Yi asked, puzzled. "I bought a cheongsam for your mom and a woolen suit for your papa." Murphy took out the clothes. The suit was old-fashioned, a bit like the one Su Wenqiang wore on the beach. The cheongsam's color was simple and elegant. It seemed that Murphy had chosen it carefully. "My parents don't necessarily wear these, especially my father. Sigh, how should I put it? He's not that particular about what he wears, but he doesn't like to dress too formally. At most, he'll wear those big gowns, the kind that you see in ancient movies." "Then what should we do?" Murphy panicked. She felt that she bought the wrong things and blamed herself. "Forget it. No matter what, it's still a gift from you. Bring it back. If he doesn't like it, I'll wear it." Yang Yi smiled and took it. He placed it in the cargo compartment and covered it with a canvas. But what if your papa doesn't like it and gets angry with you or me? Murphy asked nervously. How can that be? Yang Yi patted Murphy's shoulder and comforted her. He has a bad temper, but he won't lose his temper easily unless he does something wrong. What's more, his temper is directed at me and my brother. Others can't understand it. Papa, what about Xiao Guai and the others? Shishi ran downstairs and said with a pout. We won't be at home. They'll be hungry. Well, I've asked your sister Du to help take care of them. She won't go back this spring festival. She'll come and take them to her dormitory in a while. Only then did Cece grin from ear to ear and relax. Chapter 363. Let's go. Shishi, who was sitting in the car, was very excited. She raised her little arms in the back and said in a clear voice, which eased the tension of the adults. Yang Yi stepped on the accelerator, and the tyrant drove out of the empty school gate and toward the highway. Don't be so excited. It will be a long time before we get home. Yang Huan turned her head and said to Shishi with a smile. How long will it take? Shishi was looking at the scenery outside the car window. She turned her head and asked curiously. Well, I don't know exactly how long it will take. Yang Huan was stumped. She thought for a while and said, we have to go back to Anqing and Peijun City first. Then we have to walk for a long time to get home. It might take a day. It took her half a day to get here by train. Although the train was very slow and stopped at many stations, it was indeed a long journey. It would take a day to get there by car. With the GPS, it won't take a day. Yang Yi glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror as he drove. He said with a smile, but now the phone can't be used for positioning and navigation. We can only follow the map. Maybe we have to ask for directions. So, we have to be prepared to sleep in the car tonight. Yang Yi left at noon. If he couldn't get there in the evening, he couldn't park the car outside. He had so many things in the car. After one night, they would be gone. Therefore, Yang Yi simply drove through the night and tried to get back to his hometown by the next morning. But what about me? Shishi frowned and said worriedly, Papa, I didn't eat much. I'll starve to death. Shishi began to regret it. Not long ago, during lunch, the little girl was so excited that she couldn't sit still. After eating a few mouthfuls of rice, she jumped out of the car and walked around with her school bag on her back, urging the adults to hurry up. It was Murphy who held the bowl and fed her a few mouthfuls. Ba. A child's babble is nothing. Yang Huan hurriedly waved his hand and shouted, Cece, you can't say that about yourself. Murphy was originally nervous and didn't speak much. At this moment, she was amused by Shishi. She reached out and touched the bridge of her daughter's nose. She smiled and said, How could I let you be hungry? We can also go to a restaurant to eat on the way. I see. Then I'm relieved. Shishi patted her chest like an adult and heaved a sigh of relief. How is it? Dong Yuer sat at the side and watched Yang Qing talk on the phone for a while before hanging up. She couldn't wait to ask. He's already set off, but he won't be able to arrive tonight. He might only arrive tomorrow morning. Yang Qing replied honestly. Then I'll let the chicken out. We can't kill it in such a hurry. If we let it out overnight, it won't be fresh tomorrow. Dong Yue put down the rag in her hand and stood up as she spoke. Mom, take a seat. I'll go. Yang Qing immediately held his mother down and walked to the courtyard. Dong Yue was still worried and followed him to the door. She watched as Yang Qing took out the rooster from the chicken coop and untied the rope on its leg. The rooster was still in shock. After it was free, it fluttered a few times and went into the flock of chickens. Only then did it calm down. Qing, sprinkle some corn on it. It hasn't eaten anything all day, and it's starving. Dong Yue instructed. With his hands behind his back, Yang Chonggui walked over slowly. However, he wasn't hunched at all. Instead, he walked with a majestic gait. He glanced at her and said with dissatisfaction, It's always the daughter-in-law who's afraid of her mother-in-law. How can a mother-in-law be nervous first? Of course you're not nervous when you set an example. I don't know what possessed me back then. That's why I fell in love with you, an old man who's almost 40 years old. I wonder if you've been with other women when you were out there. Yang Chonggui was a little embarrassed by his wife's words. He interrupted Dong Yuer's words and glared at her. What fooling around? My Yang family has been loyal since the previous dynasty. During the anti-Japanese war, we even started an uprising. 3 generations of family heads. All of them sacrificed their lives for the country. Me too. If it was Yang Qing, he wouldn't even dare to raise his head after seeing Yang Chonggui's angry glare. However, it was really like, everything has its vanquisher. Even someone as awe-inspiring as Yang Chonggui couldn't scare Dong Yuer. Dong Yuer waved her hand and interrupted his words. All right. You've been saying this to me for more than 30 years. I'm tired of hearing it. I'm illiterate. I don't know how your Yang family used to be, but I know that before you came to Wadayaku, our country wasn't at war at all. All right, let's not talk about your nonsense. Anyway, TZ isn't young anymore. He's 32 years old. I don't want him to be like you, not married even when he's almost 40. Yang Chonggui didn't have any objection to this. He didn't say anything. TZ's wife should be from the city. I don't know if she's used to the hard life in the countryside. Therefore, this first meal should leave a good impression on her. Don't scare her away. Dong Yuer said with a smile. She's not married yet. Why call her wife? Yang Chonggui frowned. Young people nowadays are different from us. They pay attention to the matchmaker's introduction and the parents' agreement. Maybe TZ has already gotten the marriage certificate with her in the city. Dong Yuer said with a smile. Bang! Yang Chonggui slammed the table next to him, causing the cups in the door to clatter. He raised his eyebrows and said angrily, he dares? The parents' order and the matchmaker's words. Even if they pay attention to freedom now, how can they throw their parents aside when it comes to important matters like marriage? Yang Qing had already finished his work and was about to return. However, when he heard his father's angry roar, he shrunk his neck and carefully retracted his steps. He then turned his head and bitterly smiled as he continued to look after the chickens in the courtyard. He didn't let them run into the ancestral hall. He silently mourned for his elder brother in his heart. Although it was called an ancestral hall, it was actually just a house built in the corner of the courtyard to worship the ancestors. However, Yang Chonggui paid great attention to this. Over at the main house, Dong Yuer didn't spoil Yang Chonggui. She said reproachfully, Hey Yang Chonggui, why are you so agitated? I was just casually saying it. It's not like it's true. Look at you. The older you get, the more muddle-headed you become. Only then did Yang Chonggui realize that he made a mistake. However, he couldn't bring himself to apologize. He pulled a long face and walked to the side with an unhappy expression. He pretended to arrange the weapons on the side. The weapons were originally placed in the courtyard. However, because the courtyard wasn't renovated in time, the weapons were moved in. On the weapons rack, there was a 9-ring saber, a 3-pointed saber, a crescent halberd, and a gold-engraved spear. There was even a long saber. They were all weapons made of 1-to-1 pure iron. However, they weren't sharpened. If they were sharpened, they would be sharp weapons. It wasn't safe to leave them at home. Even so, every weapon was shiny. The handle of the spear was as smooth as a mirror. It could be seen that Yang Chonggui and Yang Qing practiced a lot at home. Yang Chonggui, I'm telling you. I didn't say this before, but these few days, you have to let go of your bad temper. Don't scare your daughter-in-law away. I won't forgive you. Dong Yuer was worried. Okay, I know. Yang Chonggui was impatient. However, he couldn't get angry at his wife. He could only wave his hand, turn around and walk into the house. Chapter 364. In the early morning, the sun had not yet risen from the horizon, and the mist had not yet dispersed, but the village in the valley was already bustling with activity. Chickens crowed, pigs snorted, dogs barked, and the voices of the people who got up early in the morning to carry water, and the clanking of pots and ladles formed a simple and warm symphony of village life. On the road outside Wadayaku village, a large and burly pickup truck slowly drove over. Yang Yi, who was in the driver's seat, felt even more nervous when he was close to home. Although he was still smiling and looking calm, his heart was beating like a drum. He was worried that he would be exposed. Beside him sat Murphy, who was even more nervous. Last night, Murphy did not sleep well in the car. When she woke up early in the morning, she knew that they were almost home. She asked Yang-yi to stop by the roadside for a while, so that she could wash her face with mineral water. Then, she looked at the rearview mirror and tidied her hair and clothes for a while. If Yang Huan had not said that the old man at home did not like women to put on makeup, Murphy would probably have to dress up again. But even though she was fully prepared, she still looked serious when they were about to arrive. Her hands tightly grasped the hem of her clothes, and she was so nervous that she was like a string that was about to break. Yang-yi was afraid that she would be too nervous, so he arranged for Murphy to sit in the front passenger seat. Yang Huan sat in the back seat and took care of Shi, who was still sleeping soundly. It was not time for the little girl to get up yet. Yes, it's right in front of us. We're almost there. Turn at the intersection and drive down. Brother, you should remember where our house is, Yang Huan reminded him. Yang-yi, why don't we wait for Shi to wake up before we go there? She's still sleeping. Isn't it rude? Murphy suddenly leaned over and said to Yang-yi with a frown. It was just an excuse. Both Yang-yi and she knew it. Yang-yi reached out and patted the back of her hand. Then he smiled as he drove. Don't be nervous. Look at you. Come, give me your hand and relax. Don't be afraid. My parents won't eat you. Just face them as usual. They'll like you. Trust me. Really? Murphy placed her hand in Yang-yi's big palm and asked in a weak voice. She sounded like she was wronged, and also like she was begging. She wanted to get Yang-yi's affirmation again and again. Actually, she was acting coquettishly. Really? Of course. Yang-yi shook Murphy's hand and said with certainty. In fact, he did not know, but at this moment, Yang-yi had to show confidence so that Murphy would not be so afraid. Yang Huan stared at Yang-yi and Murphy holding hands, and couldn't help but shake her head secretly. She was a little overwhelmed by their love. On the other side, in the Yang family's courtyard, Yang Qing was waving a long thick knife and chopping firewood. Behind him, Yang Chongui was in a horse stance, punching out slowly. Although his movements were slow, each punch was like a dragon or a leopard, full of vigor. Chopping firewood, eyes accurate, hands steady, strength ruthless. One chop, you can see the bottom. One chop, you can cut it in half. You can't just chop it in and smash it. Yang Chongui didn't even look at Yang Qing, but his voice echoed clearly in the courtyard. Yang Qing couldn't help but turn around and explain helplessly. Dad, I know what you're saying. But today's firewood is different. It's much harder. Do you want me to chop one for you? I, Yang Chongui, have chopped firewood my whole life. I've never seen anything that I can't chop. Yang Chongui stared at him. Yang Qing looked at Yang Chongui's eyes and immediately cowered. He smiled bitterly and turned his head away, continuing to chop firewood. Diligence is the key to success. Your talent in martial arts isn't bad, but your tenacity is lacking. You have a bit of energy, but it's all in the field. Yang Chongui snorted and said, It's easy for you to say that. If Qing doesn't farm, is our family going to eat the northwest wind? Dong Yu walked out of the kitchen. She wasn't happy to hear him talk about her son like that. Yang Chongui did not say a word. He pretended that he did not hear anything and continued to practice his martial arts. Although his movements were slow, every punch was powerful and had some skill. Qing, help me catch the chicken from yesterday. I'm thinking that Huan, Tizi, and Tizi's wife will be here soon. Let's starve the chicken for the morning and clear its stomach. We'll kill it at noon. Dong Yuer said. Okay. Yang Qing quickly put the chopping knife aside, clapped his hands, and walked towards the ox cart where the chickens were lying. Dee. Suddenly, a loud and clear sound of a car horn came from the courtyard entrance. The door of the Yang family's courtyard wasn't a gray-green closed iron door, but an iron gate that stretched as far as the eye could see. Therefore, the three of them turned around and saw a big car that they had never seen before parked in front of the gate. What's going on? Before they could think of the key point, Yang-yi had already gotten down from the driver's seat. Yang Huan also jumped down from the back seat. Yang-yi was still thinking about how to greet them. Yang Huan was more lively. She grabbed the iron gate happily and shouted, Dad, Mom, I'm back. Second brother, quickly open the door and let big brother drive the car in. Dad, Mom, Yang-yi only called them twice in the end. In his memory, Yang-yi used to call them that too. Because of his personality, Yang-yi decided not to change too much. Dong-yu reacted the fastest. She walked over with a smile and rushed to open the door. At this moment, Murphy, who was in the front passenger seat, hesitated for a moment. Then, she unfastened her seatbelt and opened the door. However, as soon as she got down from the car, the three people in the courtyard all looked at her. Murphy froze. She was so nervous that she was about to suffocate. She wasn't even this nervous when she went on stage for the first time when she was little. Fortunately, Murphy's mind didn't go blank. She still remembered to be polite. She sincerely bowed to the front and said in a low voice, "Uncle, Auntie, nice to meet you." Actually, she should have called them uncle. Young Chong-gui was obviously older than her father. However, Murphy didn't think so much. She was so nervous that she could only say what was in her mind. The first impression was very important. Dong-yu had a good impression of this eldest daughter at first sight. She was pretty and tall, with a good figure and a curvy figure. Even though she was wearing a winter coat, Dong-yu's judgment was very accurate. And she took the initiative to greet them. Although she looked a little shy, who wouldn't be shy when visiting a family for the first time? Well, this is the one Qing mentioned. Dong-yu wanted to put on the airs of a mother-in-law, but she couldn't. She opened the gate with a smile and said, "How should I address her?" Yang-yi went around, reached out and took Murphy's hand. He squeezed it gently to calm Murphy down. "Mom, this is Murphy, my wife. This is our mom and dad. This is my brother, Yang-yi. I introduced them to you before." Yang-yi smiled and said, "And you should change the way you address them. Don't call them uncle and auntie. Call them mom and dad." Dong-yu was stunned when she heard this. Wife. Call them mom and dad? What stage are they at now? Could it be that her words really came true? They got married in private? Young Chong-gui just walked over. He heard Yang Yi's words and his eyes widened. Yang Qing felt his father's imposing manner. He stopped and shrank back, pretending to help open the gate and avoid the battle. Murphy didn't notice that she was flustered by Yang Yi calling her my wife. She was happy and shy, so she was even more obedient. She bowed slightly again and whispered like Yang Yi, "Mom, Dad." Yang Chong-gui frowned and wanted to say something, but Dong Yu took the initiative and didn't give him a chance to speak. "Don't stand at the gate. You're home. You'll be laughed at if you stand outside. Come in quickly. Teasy, look at you. You didn't say anything, but you drove a car and even brought a big girl home. It's a good thing to have a happy event in pairs. Why didn't you tell us in advance?" Dong Yu reacted. Although she was complaining, she still greeted them with a smile. However, at this time, there was some movement from the open door on Murphy's side. Chapter 365. Papa, I'm cold. In the back seat, Shishi had unknowingly propped herself up with a small quilt. She rubbed her sleepy eyes and cried out pitifully. Although the noise from inside the car wasn't loud, it was still a person after all. Yang Chong-gui and Dong Yue were stunned. What's going on? There's someone else? Is this considered one surprise after another? Dong Yue was closer and had good eyesight. She immediately saw through the small gap between Murphy and the car door, and saw a small head inside. It seemed to be a child. Wait. Dong Yue reacted. She seemed to have heard something. What was the child calling? Daddy. Who was she calling Daddy? The answer was as clear as day. There was only one man coming out of the car. Who else could it be other than Yang Yi? Well, Mom, wait a moment. Yang Yi smiled awkwardly and hurriedly closed the front door. Then he opened the back door and put on a coat for Shishi. We're at your grandparents' house. Hurry up and put on your clothes. Remember to take the initiative to say hello to your grandparents later. Yang Yi's voice came out. Even Shishi's confused voice, which had just woken up, came out. Not only did Dong Yue hear it, but Yang Chong-gui also heard it clearly. Yang Chong-gui did not have time to be angry now. His mind was in a mess. He stood beside his wife and looked inside with his eyes wide open. Yang Chong-gui could no longer stand still when he heard this tender little voice. He felt like his eyes were going to wear out. However, Murphy was even more flustered. Her little plan was all messed up. She could only clumsily bow to the two elders, and then turn to the back door to help Yang Yi put on Shishi's clothes. My hair is still messy. The comb is in my bag. Yang Yi could hear Murphy's muttering very clearly. He turned his head and saw Murphy in a daze. It's okay. I'll do it. Don't panic. Calm down. You did a good job just now. Yang Yi whispered to her. Really? Murphy looked at Yang Yi pitifully. Seeing his gentle smile, she felt a little relieved. After a moment of chaos, Yang Yi bent down and carried Shishi, who had just woken up and was still in a daze, out of the car. Murphy was like a little wife, following behind Yang Yi obediently. This was the real challenge. Dad, Mom, this is Yang Shi, your granddaughter. Looking at the two elders who had fallen into a daze, Yang Yi felt a little uneasy, but he did not show it. He introduced them as usual. Shishi, quickly greet your grandparents. Shishi hugged her father's neck with one hand and rubbed her sleepy eyes with the other. She said obediently, Hello, Grandpa, Grandma. After that, she hugged her father's neck tightly again, but still secretly glanced at her grandparents. The little girl was not fully awake yet. Subconsciously, she still felt that the two of them were strangers. She was a little scared and could only rely on her father. In fact, when Yang Yi carried Shishi out, Yang Chonggui and Dong Yue were stunned. Their eyes were fixed on the cute little girl whose hair was a little messy and dazed. They suddenly realized that something was wrong. How could the child be so old? Yang Yi brought his wife home and a child. Based on the 2 years that he had not been home, this child should be at most a year old, right? Why did she look 5 or 6 years old? It could not be helped. Who asked Shishi to be so tall? Is this a... Yang Chonggui could not hold back his words, and could not help but ask. But his voice stopped abruptly. Dong Yue reacted quickly and interrupted him. Cough. Dong Yue coughed heavily and pulled her husband hard. Then she said with a smile, Okay, good girl, come in first. Come in first. Although Yang Chonggui was full of questions and even angry because of Yang Yi's sudden attack, he could not help but look at the little girl who called him Grandpa just now. Looking at the little girl's clever big eyes, he could not move his feet. This girl. What did Tizi say her name was? Yang Shi? Which she? The cold morning wind blew on her little face, and Cece was much more awake now. She hugged her father's neck, moved her little mouth to her father's ear, and whispered to him. Papa, Grandpa is looking at me. That's because Grandpa likes you. Go play with Grandpa. Papa is going to drive the car in. Yang Yi put Shishi down and patted the little girl's head. But I'm afraid. Shishi timidly looked at the white-haired grandfather who looked a little fierce, then turned around and pulled the clothes on her father's legs. Hearing Shishi's words, Yang Chonggui did something that Yang Qing, Yang Huan, and Dong Yue did not expect. He bent his back, which had been straight for decades, and even squatted down. He stretched out his hand and smiled. Yang Shi, come and let Grandpa have a look. Dong Yue looked at her husband meaningfully. She was secretly happy, but she did not say anything. Shishi turned her head to look at her grandfather, and then at her father. She was somewhat hesitant. Go and let Grandpa have a good look at you. Yang Yi quickly pushed his daughter's little butt. It was rare for the old man to be so interested in Shishi. Yang Yi's pressure in his heart was relieved. Shishi looked at Grandpa again. At this time, she felt that Grandpa's wrinkled smile did not seem so scary, so she walked over. Grandpa, are you my papa's papa? Shishi was still a little nervous. She used words to ease the tension. Murphy actually felt that Shishi's question was a little impolite. She opened her mouth but did not have the courage to say it. Just standing beside Yang Yi's mother, she was so nervous that she did not know where to put her hands. At this moment, Yang Chonggui could finally take a closer look at Shishi's appearance. Those eyebrows, those eyes suddenly made him feel inexplicably close. The doubts in his heart faded a lot. Of course, the questions that should be held back were still held back. These questions would be asked Yang Yi later. Yes, I'm your father's father, that is your grandfather. Yang Chonggui answered seriously, but it made Shishi feel very amused. The little girl giggled. Her cute smiling eyes made people's hearts melt. Yang Yi got in the car, and he poked his head out from the driver's seat. Dad, you and Shishi get out of the way, I'll drive the car in. Yang Chongwei then picked Sisi up. In the past he had probably only carried Yang Yi and his siblings when they were just born, but later on, he handed them over to Dong Yue. The strength he used to carry the child was a little different. It was as if he was throwing Sisi into the air, and then carrying her. This caused Sisi to cry out in surprise, but she also found it funny and laughed. The little girl thought that Grandpa was playing with her. Her laughter was like a silver bell, breaking the coldness of the morning, and also drawing closer the relationship between her and Grandpa. Grandpa, why is your hair all white? Shishi felt closer to Grandpa, so she asked the question in her heart. My grandpa's hair is black. Because Grandpa is old. What is Grandpa you're talking about? Hugging Sisi, Yang Chongwei walked past Yang Huan and Yang Qing. Hearing his gentle tone, Yang Huan and Yang Qing exchanged glances with each other out of amazement and disbelief. Grandpa is Grandpa, my mom's papa. The old and the little one chatted like this. Speaking of which, when did Yang Chongwei have a good chat with the siblings? Chapter 366. Huan, come here. While Yang Yi parked the car, Murphy followed the old man and Shishi to the living room. Dong Yue quickly called Yang Huan over. Huan, tell me the truth. What's the background of your brother's wife and child? Dong Yue didn't let Yang Chongwei ask because she was worried that this careless old man's questions would hurt the other person's self-esteem, especially in front of a child. However, she was also very anxious to know the answer. Mom, don't worry. My sister-in-law is a very nice person. She's very loving with my brother. Yang Huan giggled as she held her mother's hand. How long has it been since your brother retired from the army? How did they manage to raise such a big child? Although she looks very similar to you with her big eyes and small mouth, the timing doesn't match. The child should be 5 or 6 years old, right? Dong Yue could not figure it out. No, she is only 4 years old, Yang Huan explained. You can ask my brother how the child was born later. Anyway, the child is indeed my brother's. You said she looks like me. But she looks more like my brother, right? On the other side, Yang Yi parked the car and jumped out with his luggage. He was about to ask Yang Qing to help him unload the things in the trunk. In the end, Yang Qing followed him in, leaving only Yang Huan and his mother outside. Mom, why are you outside instead of staying warm inside? Yang Yi asked with a smile. Come here. I have something to ask you. Dong Yue immediately left Yang Huan behind and pulled Yang Yi into the kitchen. She then asked the question that Yang Huan did not answer earlier. Murphy's parents are from America, but she has her own business in China. Not long after I retired, I became her bodyguard. I don't know why we fell for each other, but we ended up doing it. Yang Yi made some changes to the story. He removed the part where Murphy was in danger, and he saved Murphy, and skipped to the key point. Yang Yi said, I was stupid back then. It was my fault. I always felt that I had done something wrong. I was afraid that I would be reported, so I left her and went to work in another city. I didn't expect her to get pregnant after that. She went abroad and gave birth to Shishi with her parents. It's all my fault. I didn't know that she had a child, so I couldn't take care of her and her mother. I only found out about it when I met Murphy last year. Luckily, she didn't mind. Hey you child, why are you so stupid? Dong Yue reprimanded Yang Yi, somewhat resentful of him for failing to meet her expectations. Yang Yi could only smile wryly. Yes, I shouldn't have done this. It's all my fault. I didn't know how to tell you and I didn't know how. I didn't know how to tell you and I didn't dare to tell you and… Then is the child really yours? Is it confirmed? Dong Yue was still on Yang Yi's side. She was still worried. Yes, the paternity test was done. It was proven scientifically. Yang Yi lied through his teeth. He and Murphy didn't do the paternity test at all, because the truth was in front of them. As long as one wasn't blind, they could see that Shishi had Yang Yi's shadow. Yang Yi also believed that with Murphy's simple mind, she couldn't lie. After Dong Yue confirmed it, she let out a long sigh of relief. She said happily, That's good, that's good. You have a beautiful daughter-in-law, and we have a beautiful granddaughter. I was worried that you would be as stubborn as your father. If there wasn't a woman following you wholeheartedly, I'm afraid that you wouldn't be able to get a wife in this life. She was indeed his biological mother. Yang-yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry at his mother's happy expression, as if she had picked up a treasure. It didn't matter if he took the blame for his predecessor, as long as he passed her test. Dong Yue was still a little unsatisfied. She said regretfully, "It's a pity that you gave birth to a daughter and not a son. Your father has always been looking forward to having a grandson to carry on the Yang family's ancestral line." He was still hoping for another grandson to fall from the sky. Yang-yi said helplessly, "Mom, this can't be controlled. Besides, a son is too naughty. A daughter is better. She is so cute." Yang Chonggue, who was looking forward to having a grandson, was sitting in an armchair and playing with his granddaughter in his arms. "Yang Shi, which Shi word is in your name? Is it the Shi of watermelon or the Shi of hope?" Yang Chonggue still didn't understand his granddaughter's name. "Neither he. Grandpa, I'll write it for you." She took her grandfather's hand and opened his palm. Her grandfather's hand was as big as her father's. It could be used as a paper to write. The little girl wrote her name stroke by stroke on it. "So it's Shi of Chunxi." Yang Chonggue stroked his beard and nodded gently. "You can actually write such complicated characters." My papa taught me." She said happily and curiously asked, "Grandpa, what's your name?" "Grandpa's name is Yang Chonggue, Chong of noble and Gui of wealth." Yang Chonggue gently pinched Shishi's finger and wrote these two characters on his hand. "Oh, I can't recognize it. My papa hasn't taught me how to write yet." Shishi explained to her grandfather. "I can only write my name." "Haha, then Grandpa will teach you how to write. How about writing big characters?" Yang Chonggue laughed heartily. His beard shook, which attracted the little girl's attention more than writing. "Grandpa, your beard is long, but me and my papa don't have a beard." "You're a girl, how can you have a beard? Your father should shave his beard often. But Grandpa's beard has been growing for several years and needs to be trimmed often. You see, it can move." Yang Chonggue was very playful. He wrinkled his nose and shook the two whiskers above his lips. It's really fun." The little girl was amused by him and giggled. "You can also touch it." Yang Chonggue said, "I don't want to zap, it will hurt." She pouted her small mouth and said with some fear. Before her father shaved his beard, he would prick Shishi until she cried. "It doesn't hurt, try it." Yang Chonggue took the little girl's small hand and put his face close to it. "Hey, it's soft, it doesn't hurt." Shishi was startled at first, and then she immediately found the difference. She curiously reached out to touch it again, and then pulled it, and then smiled at her grandfather like two crescent moons. Yang Qing, who had followed them into the hall, was frightened. The little girl was touching the tiger's butt. Murphy should have stayed behind to communicate with Yang Yi's mother, but she was nervous and a little confused, so she followed Shishi and Grandpa Yang into the hall. Now looking at Yang Chonggue and Shishi, one old and one young, playing so happily, Murphy was a little relieved. She calmed down and then realized her mistake, and was a little annoyed. However, she was standing with Yang Yi's brother, which was more or less awkward. Murphy was not the kind of person who was good at talking, and Yang Qing also felt that Murphy was a little too beautiful and fashionable. When she didn't speak, there was a deep sense of distance between them. The two didn't talk, and just stood there in a daze. Fortunately, Yang Huan walked in excitedly at this moment. "Second brother, sister-in-law, why aren't you talking?" Yang Huan changed the way he addressed Murphy to distinguish her from Yang Qing, and then introduced them to each other. "Hello, Yang Qing, nice to meet you." Murphy was a little embarrassed to greet Yang Qing. "Hello, sister-in-law, hello. You can call me Qingzi like my brother." Yang Qing was a little embarrassed to look at Murphy directly. In the countryside, he had never seen a woman as beautiful as Murphy. It wasn't that she was beautiful, but the problem was that if she was too beautiful, it would make people feel a deep sense of distance. When Murphy heard Yang Qing let her call him Qingzi, she nodded first and then asked in confusion, Huan Qingzi, I have a question. Why did Mom and Dad call Yang Yi Taizi just now? Isn't his name Yi? Chapter 367. Hearing Murphy's question, Yang Qing and Yang Huan looked at each other, and finally let Yang Huan explain. She pulled Murphy closer and said in a low voice, "Sister-in-law, it's like this. You might not know this, but my father was originally an outsider. When my elder brother was born, he had never thought of staying in our Wadayaku village for the rest of his life. He was determined to leave. He even said that he had something important to do, so he asked my mother to wait at home with the child and wait for him to come back with my mother and elder brother. My mother couldn't persuade him, so she named my elder brother Yang Tiexin. Later, I don't know why my father changed his mind. He was determined to stay and live a good life with my mother. So my mother felt that it was a bit inappropriate for my brother to be named Yang Tiexin. So she removed the word Xian and changed it to Yang Tai. Speaking of this, my father lied to my brother for more than 10 years. He told him that he named him because he lacked gold in his 5 elements. Later, my mother let it slip, so we knew the truth." Yang Huan couldn't help laughing. She glanced at Yang Chongui and whispered, "Sister-in-law, don't mention this to my father. He's very proud." Murphy nodded but still asked confusedly, "But isn't Yang-yi the word I next to the word Che? Why is it the word Tai next to the word Jin?" Yang Huan snickered and said, "This is related to another case of injustice. When my brother was born, the household registration officers in the police station weren't like now. Some of them didn't even know as many words as my father. At that time, my mother brought a slip of paper with my brother's name written by my father to the town to register. In the end, someone copied my brother's name wrongly and wrote Yang Tai as Yang-yi. Yang Chongui didn't like to deal with the government. He let Dong Yuer take Yang-yi, who was already 2 or 3 years old, to register. At that time, it was normal to register late, and the household registration booklet was left at home. They didn't even check it until Yang-yi went to primary school. At that time there was no primary school in the village. To enroll in the primary school in town, one had to check their household register. Only then did everyone realize that Yang-yi's name was wrong. It was likely that Yang Chongui was still a little uncomfortable with the name Yang Tiexin. He took the initiative to suggest that since it was too troublesome to change the household register, they might as well make the best of it and change Yang Tiexin's name to Yang-yi. Later on, my brother's name was changed, and the family tree was changed to Yang-yi, which means my father and mother. They have been calling him Tai-zi for many years. They are used to it and can't change it," Yang Huan said with a smile. So that was the case. Murphy also revealed a smile. Just as she was about to speak, Yang Chongui suddenly exclaimed, "Ouch!" Murphy turned around and saw Shishi tugging at her grandfather's beard, causing Yang Chongui to feel pain. The little girl still didn't know. When her grandfather called her, she hurriedly let go of his hand, as if she had done something wrong and was embarrassed. "Shishi, you can't pull Grandpa's beard. It's impolite." Murphy anxiously scolded. "Grandpa, I'm sorry," Shishi pouted and said. "Let me blow on it for you. It won't hurt after that." "It's okay. Don't blame the child. I was just teasing her." Yang Chongui waved his hand but didn't raise his head. He kept looking at Shishi's self-blaming and pitiful appearance and chuckled. "I've never seen my dad smile like that before," Yang Huan said enviously. "He's never smiled so much in a year." Yang Qing also complained in a low voice. Dong Yue had already prepared breakfast. Although it wasn't enough, everyone ate a little. Yang Yi had just returned. He needed to pack his luggage and tidy up his room. So he and Murphy took Shishi to the 4th floor. "Qing, Huan, go and catch that little chicken. We'll eat chicken tonight." Dong Yue sent the siblings away. Then she impatiently told Yang Chongui what she had learned. "I knew it. He didn't serve in the army outside. He must be up to no good after he retired." Yang Chongui was so angry that he panted like a red-eyed bull. "When he comes down later, I'll break the ruler at home. Otherwise, I'm not his father. Why are you in such a hurry? I haven't finished yet." Tizi didn't do it on purpose. He didn't know that the child was pregnant. Dong Yue finished the rest of the story. Then she scolded. "I don't care about your bad temper usually. But today, if I hadn't stopped you, would you have asked the child if she was her father's daughter in front of her face?" Yang Chongui didn't say anything. He knew that he was wrong, but he didn't admit it. Young Chonggoe, you're someone who went to school. Why don't you know a bit of common sense? When you hear something that doesn't go your way, you yell and kill. I don't know if you'll scare the child. Dong Yue nagged. I'm not scaring the child. I'm talking about Tizi. The child is already so old. If you bring him home, how will the neighbors talk about our Yang family? Moreover, our Yang family is upright and upright. We don't have a descendant like him who doesn't admit it after doing something with someone else's daughter. Yang Chonggoe said with dissatisfaction. Okay, I don't care how you discipline Tizi, but you have to pay attention to your attitude towards the children. Pay attention to what you say. Don't let the children be afraid of you. Dong Yue didn't see how Yang Chonggoe was playing with Cici in the lobby before, so she reminded him repeatedly. I know. Yang Chonggoe didn't want to explain. He waved his hand impatiently. Dong Yue patted her thigh and shouted. Hey, I forgot to ask Tizi. Look at how many things he brought back today. There's old ginseng and deer antlers. What's wrong with that? I'm his father. It's natural for a son to be filial to his father. Yang Chonggoe snorted proudly. You're not in charge of the family and don't care about money. What do you know? Dong Yue said unhappily. The second son of the Zheng family village fell down the mountain 2 years ago. Fortunately, there was an old ginseng at home to keep him alive. That's why he was sent to the county in time. Do you know how much that ginseng is worth? If someone offered $1 million, he wouldn't be willing to sell it. Where did Tizi get so much money? Yang Chonggoe finally became suspicious. He frowned and said, Yeah, he gave money to build a house and drove such a big car. Could it be that Murphy gave it to him? Dong Yue pondered. He dares? Using a woman's money? Even if he doesn't find it embarrassing. I don't have the face to see my Yang family's ancestors. Yang Chonggoe slammed the table in exasperation. Dad, what are you so agitated about? Yang Huan, who had just finished catching the chicken, heard Yang Chonggoe's loud roar as soon as she came in. She laughed and said, You've all misunderstood. My brother earned all this money himself. He's now writing novels and earning a lot of money. Writing novels? Yang Chonggoe and Dong Yue looked confused. Yang Chonggoe knew what novels were. He asked in confusion. You can earn money by writing those things? Yes. Dad, times are different now. You can earn a lot of money by writing novels as long as many people like to read them. Yang Huan turned and ran to her luggage. She had already prepared 2 books written by Yang Yi, Soldier's Assault and Drawing Sword, for Yang Chonggoe to read. These 2 books written by my brother are very popular, Yang Huan said with a grin. Yang Huan said with a smile. I heard that a director is going to make a TV series about him. Dong Yue knew about TV series. The TV in the snack shop at the east side of the village was surrounded by people watching TV series all day long. However, that was too far away from them. The 2 elders had no idea what was so special about it. Yang Chonggoe, on the other hand, was a little interested in the 2 books. He opened them and looked at them. When he saw that Drawing Sword was about the anti-Japanese war, his desire to continue reading grew. After flipping through a few pages, he was quickly attracted by the righteous and rough Li Yunlong. However, Yang Chonggoe quickly threw the book aside, because Shishi's voice came from the stairs. Grandpa, Grandpa! She was calling out happily. Her crisp voice was better than any lark. The little girl was coming down. Chapter 368. Grandpa, Grandpa! Shishi was alone, carrying a white plastic bag. She held the wall and carefully walked down the stairs step by step. Before she reached the first floor, she couldn't wait to call out. Yang Chonggoe saw Shishi's small figure appear alone at the top of the stairs. He couldn't sit still. He got up and strode over to greet her. He even said, Slow down, Yangshi. Why did you come down alone? What if you fall? Although he still used a reproachful tone out of habit, the concern in the old man's eyes could not be concealed. He wished he could go up and carry Shishi down. Grandpa, I'll give you something delicious. Shishi raised the white bag in her hand and said with a smile. It was not easy for her to complete the achievement of walking down the stairs. However, She was just a few steps away from being carried into her grandfather's arms. Young Chongwei hugged Shishi. The more he looked at her, the more he liked her. Previously, he only vaguely felt that she was close to him. Now that he had confirmed that she was his biological granddaughter, the old man looked at her small face and couldn't bear to put Shishi down. Shishi was still thinking about the delicious food she wanted to share with her grandfather. In her grandfather's arms, she opened the bag and took out a small bottle. Then the little girl quickly put the bag on her wrist. Then, she twisted the lid of the small bottle with both hands, revealing a small mouth like a toothpick box. She said very seriously, "Grandpa, let me tell you, this is delicious." "What is this?" Only then did Yang Chongwei move his gaze from his granddaughter's face to the small bottle. He saw that there were small things inside. "This is mouse feces." Shishi said the name, and she quickly waved her hand and giggled. Grandpa, don't be afraid. It's not mouse feces. Papa said it's just called the name, not mouse feces." "Is that so?" "Grandpa knows. It should be made of orange peel, plum, hawthorn, and other raw materials. It's also called jigong pill. Grandpa has seen it before." Young Chongwei smiled. When he heard the name, he had already realized who it was. He had seen it when he passed by Jinling in his early years. At that time, when he heard that it was a rat's poop, he almost destroyed the stall. It was the first time that Shishi had heard such a detailed explanation. She looked at her grandfather with some admiration and said, "Wow, Grandpa, you're so amazing. You know so much." Under his granddaughter's gaze, Yang Chongwei stroked his beard and smiled proudly. Next, Shishi poured out a piece of jigong pill and pinched it, asking Grandpa to open his mouth. Then, she stuffed the snack into Grandpa's mouth. After that, she even rubbed her 2 fingers together, as if the powder on her fingers was also very delicious. In fact, Shishi would even lick her fingers when eating. He didn't care whether Shishi's hands were clean or not. In the countryside, there was no need to be so particular. Moreover, these were snacks given by his granddaughter. Yang Chongwei smacked his lips and finished them all in one go. "Wow, delicious." Yang Chongwei gave Shishi a thumbs up. The little girl was also very happy. Dong Yue, who was watching from the side, couldn't stand it anymore. She walked over and said, "Little Yangshi, you gave your grandpa delicious food. Why didn't you give grandma a piece too?" Shishi wasn't familiar with her grandma yet, but she knew that she was her grandma. She said obediently, "Grandma, wait a moment. I'll give it to you now." Yang Yi and Mo Fei quickly packed up and came downstairs. Mo Fei also changed into a very simple dress, which she bought when she went shopping with Yang Huan before. It was one of the few clothes in her wardrobe that were sold at street stalls. Although she was wearing simple clothes, Murphy still looked like a fairy who had descended to the mortal world. Her delicate and beautiful face couldn't be covered by these clothes. In the morning, several guests came to the house. Yang Yi came back to drive the car. It was a big commotion. Not long after he arrived home, the whole village knew that the eldest son of the Yang family was driving home. The villagers who weren't very familiar with them pretended to pass by the door and looked around. When they saw the car in the yard, the neighbors who were familiar with them and Dong Yue's relatives came to visit them. It was quite lively, especially the children who were wearing muddy shoes and pants. Yang Yi took out snacks and asked Shishi to give them to her brothers and sisters. The children played together for a while. It was just that it was a bit difficult for Yang Yi to explain his relationship with Mo Fei and Cici one by one. However, in this small village where the sun rose and the sun fell, Murphy also enjoyed the life of an ordinary person. No one recognized that she was a big star. They just thought that this daughter-in-law from the city was very beautiful and flattered her. Murphy didn't put on a cold face anymore. Instead, she wore a smile and followed behind Yang Yi to accompany him to greet the guests. Brother Dongfang, third uncle, Uncle Ting. These names were actually called out. Murphy was also confused, but she still tried hard to remember and help poor T. Even if she didn't like to interact with strangers, Murphy still showed the attitude that a daughter-in-law should have. Yang Yi knew Murphy's character. He found an opportunity to hold Murphy's hand and said softly, "It's been hard on you." "No, it's what I should do." Murphy tightly hugged Yang Yi's arm, as if she was looking for someone to rely on. She gently smiled. With Yang Yi's words, she didn't feel tired at all. At this moment, a few young men in their 20s came back with another young man. They excitedly shouted, "Brother Tizi, Junzi drives a truck for people in the county. He has a driver's license." The young man called Junzi was also eager to give it a try. "Brother Tizi, can you take me to try your car? I've never seen such a beautiful car. This is a pickup." Yang Yi smiled and corrected. "You want to drive? Sure, I'll see how good your skills are. But I have to watch from the side and don't let you drive the car into the ditch." "Brother Tizi, I'll sit in the back. I'll stand in the back." There was a young man who was maverick. Everyone else had to sit in the back seat. He pointed at the trunk and intended to stand there alone to enjoy the wind. Yang Yi took them out to play. Moreover, it was almost noon, so the neighbors stopped visiting. Murphy breathed a sigh of relief and stayed with Shishi to accompany Yang Chonggue. Dong Yue came out with a teapot. The teapot was a little big. It was different from the small teapot of Kung Fu tea. It was a big iron kettle with tea inside. Dong Yue turned the teacups over one by one, but her movements were a little slow. While doing so, she looked at Murphy with a smile and said, "Murphy, there were too many people just now. I forgot to call you. Come and have some tea." Murphy didn't think too much about it. She came to the countryside and didn't want to be a young mistress. Seeing Yang Yi's mother pouring tea for her, she felt apologetic. She quickly stood up and walked over. "Mom, let me do it. I should be the one pouring tea." Dong Yue's eyes flashed with a trace of satisfaction. She handed the teapot to Murphy and retracted her hand. She watched Murphy skillfully boil the teacups, and then pour tea from the teapot. She slowly asked, "Murphy, do you often drink tea at home?" "I don't drink much. When I was at home, my father drank a lot, so I learned from him," Murphy said frankly. Yang Chonggue and Dong Yue each sat on an armchair, with a square table between them. However, Yang Chonggue's attention was completely focused on Shishi, who was running in and out of the door. Shishi was having fun alone. She felt that this place was too fun. Although the cow pen was a little smelly, there were so many chickens and ducklings in the yard. The little girl couldn't even look at them all. "Mom, Dad, have some tea." Murphy poured the tea and respectfully served it to the two elders. Yang Chonggue looked at her and nodded his head majestically. Although he didn't say anything, he didn't want to embarrass Murphy. He took the tea and took a sip. "Good, good." Dong Yue was full of smiles, which made Murphy feel a little relieved. At this moment, Yang Qing and Yang Huan, who had set up a greenhouse to plant winter vegetables, came back. "Take a seat first. I'll make lunch for you." Dong Yue stood up and massaged her waist. She smiled at Murphy and said, "Sai, I'm getting old. My waist is a little weak." Chapter 369. Making lunch? Yang Huan's words suddenly rang in Murphy's ears. "My parents are more traditional. They like a sensible, filial, and virtuous daughter-in-law. If you can help my mom cook and make her happy, my dad won't have a problem." "Yes, lunch." Murphy quickly stood up and said, "Mom, let me help you." She was still relatively rational. After a few days of studying, she realized her shortcomings. What Mo Fei said was that she wanted to help, not that she wanted to do all the work. "Okay." Dong Yue looked at Murphy and nodded with a smile. Murphy and Dong Yue walked out of the hall and headed to the kitchen. Yang Huan saw them, rolled up her sleeves, and walked over. However, when Dong Yue saw her, she rolled her eyes and said, Huan, I don't need you to help me cook today. Stay in the courtyard, and keep an eye on little Yang Shi. Don't let her run to the cow pen and get kicked by Da Huang." "Oh." Yang Huan had to stop. She looked at Murphy's back and sighed in her heart. "Sister-in-law, it's not that I don't want to help. It's just that my mom is too cunning. Good luck." When she arrived at the kitchen, Mo Fei first looked around, but she was immediately dumbfounded. What were these two big dark pits? A stove? Murphy had seen many stoves since she was young. Gas stoves, natural gas stoves, induction stoves, and even iron plates like those in restaurants. Anyway, she had never seen anything like this. No, she had seen it on TV. It was a primitive stove for burning firewood. Next to it were pieces of firewood chopped by Yang Qing, and some dead branches and leaves used to start the fire. Because of the firewood, the whole newly built kitchen was smoked black. Fortunately, there were electric lights, so it was still bright. However, Murphy was a little confused. How did she use this stove? Murphy, this is the pot for cooking. The rice is over there. Go wash the rice first, Dong Yue instructed. Cooking? This was what Murphy had learned the most in the past few days. She let out a sigh of relief and hurriedly responded. She carried the big pot of rice with both hands and moved it to the bag of rice. Dong Yue didn't deliberately make things difficult for Murphy. She guided her from the side. There are 6 adults and 1 child in the house. Men eat more. You should pour 3 spoonfuls of rice. The spoon here was different from the measuring bucket that came with the rice cooker. It was an old type of enamel cup that was used for drinking water. 1 spoon could hold a lot of water. But Murphy didn't question it. She followed Dong Yue's instructions and packed the rice. Then, she took it to the tap and twisted it. However, not a single drop of water came out. This faucet is useless. You can use the well water in this tank. We drink well water at home. When we were building the house, the master said that the town was doing something like running water. It would save us a lot of trouble if we installed a faucet and a pipe. But it's useless now, Dong Yue explained with a smile. Mo Fei hurriedly nodded and carried the rice over there. She didn't know if it was because of nervousness or tiredness. In the middle of winter, Murphy's forehead was sweating. After a while, Murphy finally finished washing the rice. She tilted the pot and poured the rice washing water into the ditch at the side. The rice washing water should be left for washing vegetables and watering trees. Dong Yue, who was making a fire at the side, opened her mouth. She originally wanted to scold her, but when the words reached her mouth, she swallowed them back. It wasn't a big problem. She didn't want to dampen her enthusiasm. Then, Dong Yue saw Murphy filling the pot with water. 1 spoon, 2 spoonfuls, 3 spoonfuls, and she didn't stop. Murphy, what are you doing? Dong Yue couldn't help but ask. I'm filling the pot with water. When there's enough water, we can cook. Murphy raised her head and said with a smile. Cough cough, Murphy, you did well. This is almost done. Put it down. I'll put it on the stove later. You go find Qing Zi and ask him where he put the vegetables he plucked. Quickly send it over. Dong Yue said with a smile. Okay. Murphy washed her hands and quickly went out to find Yang Qing. After Murphy went out, Dong Yue walked over and picked up the pot. Looking at the overflowing water, she couldn't help but shake her head. Dong Yue reached out her hand and picked out the remaining small pebbles and debris in the rice. Then, she poured the new rice washing water into the wooden bucket at the side. Then, she scooped an appropriate amount of well water from the water tank and put it on the stove to boil. Murphy, Missouri Shawan, Xiao AI and the others probably experimented with the rice sold in the supermarket. Those rice were all carefully sifted and the debris were basically removed. They only needed to be washed once. After a while, Murphy laboriously carried a basket of vegetables back. Mom, what should I do now? Murphy asked. Just now when she successfully cooked the rice, it gave her a bit of confidence and she also took the initiative. Well, you first wash these white radishes, then peel the skin, and then choose the vegetables. Oh, okay. Murphy immediately took action. She still recognized the white radishes. Murphy picked out 2 white radishes from the basket. There were still drooping leaves on top and soil in the cracks of the skin. They were very fresh. Mom, why are there so many fresh vegetables at home? Isn't it winter now? Murphy said as she scooped water to wash the vegetables. In order to ease the awkwardness, she rarely took the initiative to open a topic. The vegetables were grown in the greenhouse that we built at home. We didn't have it before. The year before last, the town's agricultural science station sent experts to guide us to build the greenhouse. They also gave us subsidies. This winter, we had fresh vegetables to eat. The year before last, we didn't grow well. Last year, we had some experience. This year, there are more vegetables. You came at a good time, Dong Yue said as she poked the stove. She looked up and saw Murphy was focused on washing the radish leaves. Outside, Yang Yi had just driven the car back. Those rascals were also going back for lunch, but they still wanted to go for a ride with Yang Yi in the afternoon. Papa, look, I named these chicks. It's called Hua Hua because it's the most beautiful one. It's called Oo. She waited for her father to get out of the car. She couldn't wait to pull her father and pointed at the chickens in the yard and introduced them to him. Where's your mom? Yang Yi asked as he looked at the hall and didn't see Murphy. He felt strange and asked, Mom. Where's Mom? She didn't find her mother until now. Yang Huan was sprinkling grains to feed the chickens to Shi. She heard the conversation between Yang Yi and Shi and said with a smile, Sister-in-law went to the kitchen to cook lunch with Mom. Wait a minute, what did you say? Yang Yi thought he misheard. Yang Huan repeated his words. Murphy, she cooks? Yang Yi still couldn't believe it. Murphy used to hire a housekeeper in her own house. How could she cook? Yang Yi didn't believe it. Yes. Sister-in-law must have practiced for several days, right? Brother, you don't know? Yang Huan asked curiously. At this time, Yang Yi suddenly remembered Murphy's gloomy look when she came back a few days ago. He suddenly understood. It doesn't matter. Mom is here. Sister-in-law is just an assistant at most. Yang Huan said with a smile. But Yang Yi wasn't so optimistic. Chapter 370. In the kitchen, Murphy washed the radishes and struggled to move the chopping board. She held the knife and was at a loss, not knowing where to start. Murphy, come over here and help me choose the vegetables. I'm old and my back is a little weak. I can't bend for too long. Dong Yue said at the right time and looked at Murphy with a smile. She had already sorted out the vegetables in the basket just now, which saved Mo Fei a lot of trouble. Okay. Murphy was very obedient. However, when Murphy sat on the small stool and looked at the vegetables, cowpeas, asparagus and so on the ground, she was worried. She had eaten all of these vegetables before, but she didn't know how to deal with them alone. However, she still had to do the work. Murphy picked up a handful of amaranth, hesitated for a moment, and began to pinch out the leaves that were bitten by insects and had small holes. Then, she plucked out a few leaves that looked wilted. However, Murphy started again and plucked out a few intact leaves. She felt that the other leaves were purplish-red with a circle of green around them, but these leaves were completely purplish-red and seemed to be rotten. It seemed that in Murphy's impression, choosing vegetables was just picking out the rotten leaves, so after she was done, she put down the amaranth and picked up the cowpeas. It's really difficult. This is called beans, right? How do I deal with it? Murphy looked at the cowpeas in a daze. She wanted to use the old method to pick out the bad cowpeas and throw them away, but it seemed that it was difficult to pick, and every one of them looked the same. Just when Murphy was in a dilemma, Yang Yi's voice suddenly came from behind. Mom, Murphy, are you cooking? Murphy turned her head in surprise, and Yang Yi appeared at the kitchen door. You're done with your work? Dong Yue glanced at Yang Yi and didn't understand why he would appear here. Was he worried about his wife? Yes, Junzi and the others went back. Yang Yi smiled and said, I'm here to help. What are you doing in the kitchen? Do you know how to cook? Dong Yue rebuked. Or are you worried that I'll mistreat your wife? Don't worry, I'm just letting Murphy be my assistant. As Dong Yue spoke, her hands did not stop moving. The radish that had just been peeled was chopped into pieces by her with a few chop chop chop. It's not like that. Mom, why are you still looking down on me? I'll cook 2 dishes for you later and show you my culinary skills. Yang Yi smiled as he sat down beside Murphy and took the cowpeas from Murphy's hand. Watch. Yang Yi signaled to Murphy with his eyes. Then, he slowly removed the veins from the cowpeas and threw them into the basin next to him. Murphy immediately understood. She imitated Yang Yi's actions and picked up the cowpeas. Of course, Yang Yi's actions were faster. In just a few seconds, the cowpeas in his hands were ready. Dong Yue was actually not at ease. She had already seen how good Murphy's culinary skills were. As for her own son, Yang Yi, when he was at home, he was just like his father. He had never cooked before. So Dong Yue couldn't help but take a few more glances. but Yang Yi's actions were so skillful that it made her stunned. This little rascal, when did he learn this skill? When Dong Yuer added the firewood for cooking, she turned her head again and saw Yang Yi rolling up Murphy's sleeves. Murphy raised her hand and let Yang Yi roll up her sleeves. She looked at Yang Yi and smiled happily. These two children. The corners of Dong Yuer's mouth curled up slightly, but she still turned her head and continued to poke at the stove, leaving a vent in the middle. Yang Yi continued to teach Murphy how to pick vegetables while he finished most of the chores. At the same time, he also picked up the good leaves that Murphy had thrown away and taught her how to pinch the roots of the amaranth. Seeing that his mother wasn't paying attention to him, Yang Yi couldn't help but move the stool and sit beside Murphy. He leaned close to her ear and whispered, "Why did you suddenly think of cooking? Didn't you never know how to cook?" Perhaps it was because of Yang Yi's slightly teasing and reproachful tone. Mo Fei pouted her lips a little aggrievedly. She leaned her knee sideways and bumped Yang Yi's leg. "It's all because of you." "What?" "To leave a good impression on your mom." Murphy kept her attention on Dong Yuer. She was afraid that she would see her whispering to Yang Yi. Just like how she was afraid of the class teacher, she whispered angrily. After saying that, Murphy felt a little embarrassed. Yang Yi couldn't help but laugh. He turned his head and glanced at his mother. Then he reached out to grab Murphy's hand. Wet in the winter, her fair hand was a little blue from the cold. He interlaced his fingers with Murphy's and held her hand tightly. He whispered, "You're so cute." Murphy looked at the deep love in Yang Yi's eyes and her heart was filled with joy. The nervousness, self-reproach, and embarrassment from before were all swept away. With Yang Yi's guidance and help, the assistant work progressed very quickly. In a short while all the vegetables were selected. Even the cowpeas were washed and cut into pieces by Yang Yi on the chopping board. During this time, Dong Yuer had also prepared the meat ingredients. "Mom, you can watch over us from the side. Since I'm back, you can enjoy your life." Yang Yi smiled and started to seize power. Dong Yuer was more interested in Yang Yi than Murphy. She simply stopped and stood by the side with a smile. It was as if she was really going to let go of Yang Yi and his wife. Before cooking, they had to start a fire. This wasn't a problem for Yang Yi. In his previous life, his survival skills were even better than Bear Grylls. It was just a firewood stove. With the stove beside it, Yang Yi could draw out the charcoal from the stove. It didn't take long for him to start a fire. "What do I need to do?" Murphy pulled on Yang Yi's sleeve and asked softly, "Help me get the seasoning." Yang Yi patted Murphy's waist and said gently. He didn't dare to let Murphy cook. From the charcoal smell when she came home in the past, no one would be able to eat the dishes she cooked. "Okay." Murphy nodded obediently. After heating up the wok, Feng Yu poured the oil and added the garlic cloves. The entire kitchen was filled with a thick fragrance. Murphy couldn't help but wrinkle her nose and sniff. This fragrance was really irresistible. It was too tempting. The large iron pot used by farmers could cook enough food for more than 10 people. Yang Yi liked it very much because it had a big stomach and a lot of room to perform. Feng Yu could be seen pouring in the ingredients and stir-frying at the same time. His actions were like that of a chef. Dong Yuer was watching from the side. At first, she was still worried. But after seeing Yang Yi's actions, she finally understood that her son had learned how to cook. "Murphy, help me get the salt," Yang Yi said with a smile. In fact, he could go and get it himself. It was just next to him, but Yang Yi had to give Mo Fei something to do. Mo Fei wanted to perform well. "Okay." Murphy was stunned. But she didn't forget her responsibility, and quickly went to look for the salt. Chapter 371. It's 24. Xiaohan made a mistake. Most of the seasonings at home were packed in big bowls, so were ginger, garlic and chili. There were special pots for soy sauce and peanut oil, but they were different from the ones sold in the supermarkets in the city. Because the peanut oil here was freshly squeezed by machines, there was a special workshop in town. When the peanut oil and soy sauce were used up, they would bring their own pots to buy them. Note 1. But even though it was obvious at a glance, Murphy still searched for a while and finally brought it to Yang Yi. Yang Yi picked up the spoon and prepared to add salt. But when he dug, He felt that something was wrong. The texture was not right, and the salt should not be so soft and sticky. His attention shifted from the pot to the big bowl. Looking at the crystal structure of the salt in the bowl, he immediately understood. Cough, cough. Yang Yi quietly put it aside, pointed to the bowl of coarse salt, and said, "Murphy, bring that to me." Murphy was not stupid. Her big bright eyes had been watching Yang Yi's movements. Seeing that Yang Yi had already prepared to spoon the salt into the pot, but he took it back, she knew that she had taken the wrong one. She was so embarrassed that her face was boiling hot, and her ears were red. She pursed her lips and brought the real salt to Yang Yi. Dong Yue watched for a while, and also had a certain understanding of Yang Yi's cooking skills, so she was relieved. However, she couldn't stay idle. The kitchen was occupied by her children, and there was really nothing for her to do. Dong Yue remembered the chicken outside that she was going to kill. After Dong Yue went out, Murphy finally couldn't help it. She pointed to the bowl of sugar and whispered to Yang Yi, "Yang Yi, isn't this salt?" Yang Yi finally couldn't hold it in and he laughed softly. "You're still laughing at me, I don't understand." Murphy rebuked and hammered his arm. Yang Yi added some water and covered the pot with the lid. Then he turned his head and pointed at the candy with a smile. "Try it." Murphy obeyed and reached out her finger to touch it gently. Her finger was still a little damp from washing the vegetables. Instantly, her fingertips were stained with a thin layer of sugar. She licked it and looked at Yang Yi in surprise. "It's sweet." "Yes, that's right. This is the candy. Look, doesn't it feel a little sparkling and translucent? And then it sticks together." Yang Yi taught Murphy how to distinguish it. "But isn't salt sticky?" Murphy asked, puzzled. "It's not the same. Refined salt is in the form of powder, which is smaller than the sugar particles. Moreover, they absorb the moisture in the air, so the way they stick is different. Sugar cubes are more sticky, while salt cubes are not." Yang Yi analyzed. He smiled and said, "Moreover, we eat coarse salt here. You see, it's all in pieces. It's not your fault that you don't know." "Hey, did Mom see it just now? She must think that my daughter-in-law doesn't know how to cook, so she got angry and walked out." Murphy said, blaming herself. "No. Why would she be angry with you? You just don't know how to cook. What's the big deal?" Yang Yi smiled. "But Yang Huan told me that your family likes daughters-in-law who can cook." Murphy did not relax and frowned. I did have such thoughts in the past. But don't worry, you still have me, right? I can cook and they won't make things difficult for you." Yang Yi patted Murphy's back. "Tell me, how long have you been secretly learning?" In order to make Mo Fei happy, Yang Yi changed the topic and said with a smile. "Not long. I didn't learn well. I wanted to give you a surprise, but it's a pity." Murphy was a little sad. "There's still a surprise, but I'm more touched." Yang Yi took Murphy in his arms and kissed her on the head. He said with a smile, "You silly woman, you've suffered so much for me. You've been doing everything for me. It's my turn to do the same." Murphy felt sweet in her heart, but she still hammered Yang Yi's chest. "No, you have to help me sound out your mom. If she thinks that I can't do it, you have to continue teaching me until I know how to cook." Murphy was still a little worried. Okay. Yang Yi did not need to sound out Dong Yue, because Yang Huan had already become a spy. "Mom, how's my sister-in-law doing?" Yang Huan was holding the wings and claws of the unlucky castrated chicken, so that Dong Yue could cut its throat and bleed it. The chicken's blood was good stuff. Dong Yue collected it with salt water and boiled it in the soup. The cooked chicken's blood was smooth and fragrant, and it was a rare delicacy when dipped in soy sauce. "What's your sister-in-law's job? A teacher? Is he an official?" Dong Yue asked. "Neither. She's a big star, a singing star. You don't like to watch TV. If you do, you'll definitely see her singing on TV." Yang Huan said with a smile. In fact, Murphy's show could not be seen on the TV of the small shop in the east of the village, because it could only receive a few local channels. Singing. Dong Yue frowned. No wonder. She can't cook at all. Tai Zi, on the other hand, is good at cooking. I don't know when he became good at cooking. My brother said that he learned from a chef when he was working outside. He can cook really well, Yang Huan said. Mom, it doesn't matter if my sister-in-law can't cook, right? How many girls in the city can cook? Look at my old school. The students in my class from the county can't compare with the girls in our village. They have never cooked in their whole lives. It's no use even if they have connections now. Dong Yue was in a good mood. She said with a smile. Their children are already grown up. Can I stop them from being together? The chicken in Yang Huan's hand was still struggling. Although it had lost most of its blood, its wings and feet were still shaking violently. Especially the last wave, it was shaking very violently. But after that, the chicken burped, and some warm liquid dripped from its butt onto the ground. Dong Yue let go of the chicken's neck and said to Yang Huan, "Besides, although she can't cook, I think your brother's wife is a good person." Yang Huan asked in surprise, "Really? You can tell?" Yang Huan had already been won over by Murphy's gifts. She was completely devoted to Murphy. Well, let's not talk about her looks. She's very diligent. When she saw me pouring tea, she came to help. She's not like the woman your brother met at the beginning, who only knows how to sit down and wait for food. Although she can't cook, she's willing to stay in the kitchen with you. She didn't say anything even when she was soaking in cold water in the winter. I heard that the girls in the city are spoiled. Your sister-in-law doesn't have such a bad habit. She's a woman who lives her own life. Dong Yue said to Yang Huan with a smile. Although Dong Yue was illiterate and didn't walk out of the valley, she was unusually smart. Otherwise, how could she have tamed Yang Chonggoe? That's right. My brother can cook anyway. It doesn't matter if she can cook. It's fine as long as they can live a peaceful life. Yang Huan said with a smile. Mom, how come I didn't know you were so open-minded? I'm not your father. Your father is stubborn. Humph. Dong Yue snorted proudly at her daughter's flattery. Chapter 372. During lunch, Murphy had a taste of Yang Yi's strict upbringing. Everyone at the dining table was busy eating. Even if they spoke, they would only say a few words. For example, Yang Huan praised Yang Yi's cooking. Then, under Yang Chonggue's glare, he kept quiet out of fear and continued to eat. The only one who had the privilege to speak was Cece. The little girl was not affected by the atmosphere at all. She told her grandfather and father about the new things she had encountered during her adventure in the yard while pointing at the dishes she wanted to eat. Yang Yi was about to pick up some food for Shishi, but Yang Chonggue was faster. He reached out with his chopsticks and picked up a large amount of food into Shishi's bowl. All of a sudden, the food piled up like a small mountain. Grandpa, I can't eat anymore. There's too much. Shishi held the small spoon and did not know where to start. It's good to eat more. It's good for your body, Yang Chonggue said to his granddaughter with a smile. Shishi did not like to have so much food piled up in her bowl all of a sudden. She would be sad if she spilled her favorite meat on the floor. Fortunately, Yang Yi came to help his daughter. Under Yang Chonggue's murderous gaze, he took half of the food in Shishi's bowl and said, "Give it to Dad. If you want more later, Dad will get more for you." They ate in silence and finished their lunch quickly. After a while, it was already afternoon. Yang Yi was called out by the young men from the same village who knew him to go out and have fun, so Mo Fei took Cece upstairs to take a nap. The little girl didn't get enough sleep in the morning, so she began to yawn when eating. The entire fourth floor was theirs. There were 2 big rooms next to each other, but there was very little furniture. The room they were living in now had a bed, a wardrobe, a desk and 2 chairs. In the whole room, only the bed and bedding that Murphy and Shishi slept in were new. The desk and wardrobe were moved from Yang Yi and Yang Qing's room. It was clean, but it looked old. There was even a ballpoint pen doodle on the desk that Yang Yi used to draw. The room next door was even simpler. There was only the bed that Yang Yi used to sleep in. It was not used yet, but there was a mattress for good luck. Just now, when Yang Yi was here, Mo Fei didn't feel anything. But now that Yang Yi was not here, and there were only her and Cece, Mo Fei felt that this room was a little empty, and a sense of strangeness arose suddenly. Of course, Murphy did not dislike it. She knew that Yang Yi's house was good enough. According to Yang Yi's introduction, the old house was the oldest in the village. There were 3 small rooms that could only fit the family of 5. Compared to the houses that she had seen in the car today, Murphy felt that she was very lucky. At least she was still living in a building. She heard that the tiles had not been laid yet. But wasn't this better than those old houses that were dark and dusty? Not all of the old houses in Anqing province could be called Hui-style buildings. Shishi, what do you think of Grandpa's house? Is it fun? Murphy turned to Shishi. She stretched her arm out of the blanket and gently touched her daughter's little face. It's fun. Mom, Grandpa said that he would take me to a very fun place in the afternoon. The little girl turned over to face her mother and smiled sweetly. Also, let me tell you, Grandpa has 2 little calves. They're very small. They're not as big as Mom. Murphy secretly heaved a sigh of relief. After listening to Shishi's description, Murphy knew that Shishi did not care about the simplicity of the house. She was still immersed in exploring new things. That's right. Children don't have as many twists and turns as adults. They are still very easy to satisfy. Shishi was like that now. When it came to fun things, she became excited and no longer felt sleepy. Then go to sleep. When you wake up, you can go play with Grandpa. Murphy smiled and used her finger to scratch her daughter's nose. I don't want to sleep. I want to go play with Grandpa. The little girl still acted coquettishly. No, if you don't behave, Grandpa won't like you anymore. Murphy pretended to be unhappy. Okay then, I'm going to sleep. Cece closed her eyes obediently. However, her thin eyelids were still moving a little. Her eyeballs were probably rolling around inside, and no one knew what she was thinking. It was close to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Yang Chongwei held Shishi's hand and walked leisurely on the small road in the countryside. The little girl had just woken up, but she was very energetic. She kept looking around curiously. However, some people who passed by were also curiously sizing her up. Shishi's dressing was very different from the other children in the village. Naturally, she would attract other people's attention. Shishi sometimes felt embarrassed from being stared at. She quickly walked a few steps faster and stuck close to her grandfather. Old Yang, whose child are you bringing? Finally, an old man who was of the same generation as Yang Chongwei asked. Your boss's? Yes, Iron's child. Look, is she pretty? Yang Chongwei proudly raised his eyebrows. In the past, he was very serious and had a fierce reputation, so the younger generation didn't dare to take the initiative to talk to him. But once they started talking, the neighbors in the village also started talking at the same time. Beautiful, the children in the city are beautiful. Old Yang, your family is rich now. Iron gave you money to build a house, drove a big car back, and married a wife in the city to have a child. But why do I remember that he only brought her back this time? I didn't hear that your Iron had a child before. Yes, I didn't bring her back before. We didn't build a house and had no place to live. I was afraid that the child would be wronged. Yang Chongwei smiled and fooled them. He didn't want to tell them the truth. Moreover, when he talked about this, his anger towards Yang Yi came out again. Grandpa, where are we going? Fortunately, Shishi's tender voice pulled him back from thinking about how to deal with Yang Yi, this unfilial son. We're almost there. Yang Chongwei pointed to the front. Turn the corner and we'll be there. After turning the corner, the scene in front of them suddenly opened up. There was no longer a crowded and small house. A wide and flat field appeared in front of Shishi. Hua hua. It wasn't the time for spring plowing yet. Moreover, it was close to the spring festival, so most of the young people had nothing to do. On the field, there were 2 people wrestling in the field, but the bystanders ignored them. They didn't even look at them, not to mention trying to stop the fight. They just minded their own business and played with stone locks or other weapons. Yes, weapons. There were a few weapon racks here, but compared to the ones in the Yang family's hall, the quality of the weapons here was a little worse. However, there were sabers, spears, swords, halberds, axes, battle axes, hooks, tridents, and so on. Yangshi, this is the village's martial arts practice field. Your grandfather built it himself. Yang Chongwei proudly introduced to Shishi. He wanted to hear his granddaughter's adoration. However, Shishi didn't cooperate. She anxiously pulled on her grandfather's sleeve and pointed to the 2 men who were hugging each other and rolling around on the ground. She raised her head and said, "Grandfather, they're fighting. It's not good to fight." "They're not fighting. They're just practicing martial arts and learning from each other," Yang Chonggui hurriedly explained. "Chang'an de pu, that's enough. Don't go too far. It's winter and you're ruining your clothes like this. When you get back, your mother will beat you to death," Yang Chonggui shouted. His voice was loud and clear, like winter thunder. At this moment, the old and young men in the martial arts practice field noticed Yang Chonggui's arrival and greeted him. Mu Chang'an and Li Shupo, who were sparring with each other just now, also quickly let go of their hands and got up from the ground. As if they had done something wrong, they obediently called out, "Teacher Yang." "Teacher Yang?" Shishi curiously blinked her eyes. The scene in front of her was quite magical. Many people were greeting Yang Chonggui, and most of the young people were fearfully calling him Teacher Yang. Yang Chonggui was also like an emperor on a private tour. He held Shishi's hand with one hand and put the other behind his back. He nodded as he walked past, his face glowing. Practice well. Men should practice martial arts so that they won't be bullied in the future. Yang Chonggui reached out and patted Mu Chang and Li Shupo's shoulders as he encouraged them. It was the first time the two young men had received his encouragement. Their bodies stiffened as if they had been touched by Medusa. However, Yang Chonggui wasn't satisfied. Shishi was just curious. She didn't show any surprise or adoration. Chapter 373. Yang Chonggui led Shishi through the middle of the martial arts practice field. Shishi followed her grandfather with small steps. She nervously looked at the people holding spears and swinging axes. After several conversations about Shishi's identity, Yang Chonggui took Shishi to an empty place. "Yang Shi, Grandpa will play a trick for you, okay?" Yang Chonggui's dignified appearance was swept away. With a smile, he kindly said to Shishi, "Okay." Shishi happily clapped her hands. Her reputation as the king of support was not undeserved. Yang Chonggui nodded with satisfaction. He pointed to the big stone weight on the ground that seemed to weigh 60 to 70 pounds and said, "First of all, Shishi, you take this stone weight and see if you can lift it." Shishi curiously looked at it. She really did as her grandfather taught her. She grabbed the handle of the stone weight and wanted to lift it up, but how was that possible? The little girl used all her strength, but the big stone still did not move. "You can't catch it, right?" Yang Chonggui said to his granddaughter with a smile. "This is a big stone. It's so heavy." The little girl pouted and shook her head at her grandfather. Not being able to lift it, Shishi was a little unhappy. "Grandpa can catch it, do you believe me?" Yang Chonggui patted his chest and asked. However, Shishi did not shake her head. Instead, she nodded seriously. "Do you really believe it?" The little girl did not play by the rules. Yang Chonggui's prepared words were choked in his throat. It was very uncomfortable. "Grandpa is very powerful." Shishi was still as supportive as always. She added, "My papa is also super powerful. Forget it. Let's just use our real skills." Yang Chonggui asked Shishi to stand aside. He walked to the stone weight and bent down to grab the handle of the stone weight with his right hand. Ha! With a steady exhalation, Yang Chonggui lifted the 60 to 70 pound stone weight with one hand. Wow! Shishi seemed to have forgotten what she had just said. She cried out in surprise and stared at him closely. His granddaughter's voice made Yang Chonggui feel as if he had been injected with chicken blood, and his mood became agitated. "Rise!" He roared again, raising the stone lock high above his head. Actually, Yang Chonggui didn't shout because the stone dumbbell was too heavy. Yang Chonggui did it on purpose. He probably put on a posture that made it look like it was very difficult for him to lift it up, but in the end he still lifted it up. The effect was also very obvious. Shishi stared straight at it. The little girl clasped her hands in front of her and looked at her grandfather nervously, afraid that the stone lock would fall down. Following that, Yang Chonggui really gave it his all. He played with the stone lock until it looked like a flower. Lifting and chopping were all child's play. Single flower, flipping flower, floating flower, side arm, side horse, and so on. A series of moves, a heavy stone lock flew up and down. It was as heavy as Mount Tai and as light as a butterfly. It was dazzling. Shishi watched until she forgot to cheer. Finally, Yang Chonggui came up with a difficult lock on the elbow. He threw the stone lock up, and then caught it with his elbow. This move was very thrilling. There was a sense of danger that the stone lock would smash this white-haired old man into meat paste. Shishi watched in fear and surprise. She only breathed a sigh of relief when she saw her grandfather catch the stone lock. However, the cheers of the surrounding villagers entered Shishi's ears, and the little girl became happy again. Uncle Gue is still old but vigorous. You little rascals who play all day long. Why don't you hurry up and learn from Uncle Gue? The middle-aged man from before said with a smile. Shishi roughly understood his slightly accented Mandarin, and couldn't help but puff out her small chest. How is it? Grandpa's stone lock, is it good? Yang Chonggui put down the stone lock, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and asked with a smile. After all, he was almost 70 years old. Although his body was still very strong, it was not as strong as it used to be. It's good. Shishi jumped on the ground and said happily, Grandpa is super awesome. Yang Chonggui finally saw the admiration he wanted to see in his granddaughter's eyes. He was gratified and smiled while stroking his beard. Dinner was still prepared by Yang Yi and Murphy. Murphy could help with one more thing: watching the fire. Originally, Yang Yi didn't want Murphy to do this. Sitting in front of the stove, the smoke and the fire burned. However, Murphy learned how to stuff firewood and how to unblock the vent to make the fire burn brighter. She liked this job and insisted on watching the fire for Yang Yi. Yang Yi put the plucked and gutted chicken into the pot to cook. Then he looked at Murphy, who was staring at the firewood, and said, You worked in the kitchen with Mom at noon. Later. Do you know what Mom said about you? What did she say? Did Mom tell you? Murphy was nervous. She stood up hurriedly and looked at Yang Yi. Yang Yi deliberately said expressionlessly, She didn't tell me. Yang Huan helped you sound her out, and then told me. What did she say? Did she say that I'm stupid and can't do anything? Murphy looked at Yang Yi's face and asked sadly. Of course not. Mom praised you. She said that you're hard-working and a good woman. Yang Yi suddenly laughed. He rubbed Murphy's head with his palm. His fingers were not clean. Ah. Murphy couldn't believe it. She asked stupidly, Really? Mom didn't see that I can't cook? She saw it. How could you not see it with your mediocre cooking skills? But my mom didn't care about it. She saw how hard-working you were, so she gave you a passing grade. Yang Yi drew a line in front of his chest. You're lying. It's not a passing grade. Murphy became smarter this time. She hammered Yang Yi's arm in embarrassment and said, You just said that Mom praised me. I am a good woman who lives a good life. Mo Fei repeated this comment with a joyful smile on her face. I've always felt that you're good at living. That's why I like you so much. Yang Yi pretended to be jealous. Why didn't I see you feeling gratified by my evaluation? You're a big baddie. You even lied to me. Murphy giggled as she playfully twisted her body. At this moment, Shishi came back from the training ground with her grandfather. The sky wasn't completely dark yet. The little girl couldn't wait to run to the kitchen and tell her parents about her experience in the afternoon. What training ground, what rock dance, what broadsword playing, all of these were new to Shishi. Murphy wasn't surprised that Yang Yi's father knew martial arts. But she noticed a problem and asked Yang Yi, Is Dad a teacher? Yang Yi nodded and said, About 20 years ago. The town said that it was too hard for the children in our village to go to the town's primary school. Every time we had to walk more than 10 miles on the mountain road, which was unrealistic. So they made our village use an empty house to build a primary school. They also sent teachers over, but they lacked a physical education teacher. Our dad was in the village and often taught those people martial arts. So this job fell on his head. He also got a salary, so he agreed. So now many people call my dad Teacher Yang. Yang Yi waved his hand. Then Dad is quite amazing, Murphy said with a smile. He himself quite enjoys being called. Yang Yi shook his head with a wry smile. After dinner, Yang Huan and Murphy were cleaning up the dishes and preparing to wash them in the kitchen. Dong Yue and Yang Chonggui looked at each other and said, Taiji Murphy, there's something I've always wanted to ask. Mom, go ahead. Yang Yi nodded. Have you and Mo Fei held a banquet in the city? Dong Yue was worried that Murphy would think too much. She waved her hand and said, I don't mean anything else. In our village, there's an unwritten rule. When you get married, you still have to hold a wedding banquet and invite friends and family to gather. Only then can your relationship be considered confirmed. Chapter 374. Wedding. Get married? Yang Yi showed a confused expression. He had never thought about this question. Perhaps it was because he was used to not following the rules. He used to think that it was enough for two people to be together, even if they were a stable couple. The concept of marriage had never appeared in his mind. Hearing his doubts and seeing his expression, Yang Chenggui's face immediately darkened. You two are not married? You haven't registered your marriage? Dong Yue frowned and asked. Murphy lowered her head and stood beside Yang Yi like a little daughter-in-law. She did not dare to breathe loudly. She was not wrong, but when questioned, Murphy felt as if she had joined forces with Yang Yi to deceive the two elders. She felt very uneasy. Do we have to register our marriage? Yang Yi honestly asked his question. Bang! Yang Chenggui slammed the table, causing everyone's bowls and chopsticks to jump. Yang Huan and Yang Qing lowered their heads at the same time, not daring to look directly at the old man. Even Shi, who had finished eating early and ran to the side to play by herself, was shocked by the noise. Tizi, your words are getting worse and worse. Did you learn bad things after staying outside for a few years? Dong Yue saw this and interrupted. Murphy gave birth to your child. How can you let her down like this? No, what I mean is, even if we don't register our marriage or hold a wedding, I will still spend the rest of my life with her. What's the difference? Yang Yi explained, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Murphy was stunned. She stared blankly at Yang Yi. She was touched by Yang Yi's words. Spend the rest of my life with her. From his point of view, that was indeed the case. Yang Yi did not think that a marriage certificate could make two people happy for the rest of their lives. Love needed to be carefully managed by two people. It could not be bound by a marriage certificate. You unfilial son, our young family doesn't have a scum like you who plays with women's feelings. Yang Chongguo angrily rebuked. Dong Yuer's interruption just now had no effect. Yang Yi shut his mouth. From the memories of his previous life, he knew that when the old man was furious, any further explanation would only have the opposite effect. Talking back would only make Yang Chongguo even angrier. The child is already 4 years old. If you don't marry Murphy, won't others laugh at us? This time, Dong Yue did not spoil Yang Yi. She helped him and said, Taizi, you have to think about this carefully. Consider what? I think he must have been blinded by the outside world after he retired. He doesn't even know the most basic principles of being a person. He has completely forgotten the teachings of his ancestors. Yang Chongguo slammed the table and angrily rebuked. Yang Yi avoided the limelight and remained silent. On the other hand, Murphy was panicking. She quickly opened her mouth to explain for Yang Yi. Dad, Mom, don't blame Yang Yi. It's not his fault. It's because of me. I'm working now, so I can't make our relationship public. That's why we can't get the marriage certificate. What? Yang Chongguo and Dong Yue both looked over in confusion. Yang Yi quickly pulled Murphy and whispered, Are you stupid? Why are you sticking your head out? Leave this matter to me. It's my problem. I can't let you bear the responsibility for me anymore. Murphy pouted and said, What? They're talking about the marriage certificate. I really didn't think about it before. Yang Yi waved his hand and turned to his parents. Dad, Mom, don't listen to Murphy's nonsense. I didn't think it through. He was also worried that Yang Chongguo and Dong Yue would have a bad opinion of Murphy. It wasn't easy to make them accept Murphy today. He couldn't let it go to waste. Yang Chongguo stood up with a sullen face. Come with me, old man. Dong Yue hurriedly called out. Don't worry about this. Yang Chongguo waved his sleeves and walked to the courtyard with his hands behind his back. Yang Yi stood up helplessly and wanted to follow him. At this time Murphy grabbed his hand. Yang Yi turned to look and saw tears in her eyes. It's okay. Don't worry. Yang Yi gently patted Murphy's hand and signaled to her with his eyes to his mother. Go and wash the dishes with Huan Huan. Yang Yi followed Yang Chonggui to the courtyard. Then Yang Chonggui took out the key and opened the door of the ancestral hall. The ancestral hall was an independent tile-roofed house. However, there was no electric light inside. There was only a dim kerosene lamp and a few red incense sticks flickering. Yang Chonggui didn't say anything. He took a lighter from the square table in front of the ancestral tablets and lit the 2 candles on the table. Only then did the ancestral hall become brighter. Kneel. Yang Chonggui didn't look at him. Instead, he stood in front of the ancestral tablets with his hands behind his back. With his back facing Yang Yi, he looked up at the ancestral tablets. Yang Yi hesitated for a moment and helplessly knelt on the futon. This action was very clear in the predecessor's memory. Before the predecessor was a soldier, he was often punished to kneel. After kneeling, Yang Yi didn't say anything for a long time. It was as if he was ignoring Yang Yi. However, Yang Yi still satisfied him. He knelt there with his back straight and didn't say anything. Now that you have some money, you forget your ancestors. If I give you a few more years, will you abandon your wife and children? Yang Chonggui turned around and snorted. How do you say this in the ancestral teachings? I'll recite it for you. Eccentricity is natural, repentance is inevitable. Decadence and self-satisfaction make it difficult to establish a family. Tell me, what does it mean? Yang Yi knelt on the futon and was silent for a moment. Then he said, eccentric, self-opinionated people will often do things that they regret. They will miss a lot of things that they cherish. A decadent, lazy, addicted, and unmotivated person will also find it difficult to establish a family. These ancestral teachings in the past, Yang Chonggui made the 3 siblings copy and recite them. If they couldn't remember, they would be beaten. How could Yang Yi not remember? In front of the ancestral teachings, you have to think about it for an hour and see where you went wrong. If you can't figure it out, you can kneel here tonight and don't go back. Yang Chonggui waved his sleeves and left Yang Yi in the ancestral hall. He left the door ajar and walked out. In Yang Chonggui's opinion, Yang Yi was getting more and more outrageous. If he didn't teach him a lesson, he would be too arrogant. He also knew that someone would try to persuade him, so he didn't stay at home. He would come back later. Yang Huan had been watching secretly. Then she quickly ran to the kitchen and reported to Murphy, who was panicking. Sister-in-law, my brother must have been punished by my father. I heard it. It seemed to be an hour. Yang Huan whispered to Murphy. Ah. Murphy was about to cry. Yang Yi was punished because of me? It's not all your fault. My brother is an idiot. He shouldn't have said that and annoyed my father. Yang Huan took Murphy's hand and said, but don't be afraid. An hour is a light punishment. Last time, my brother got drunk and got into a fight with the villagers. My father whipped him twice and punished him to kneel for a night. The next day, his legs didn't even belong to him. But it's so cold now. Murphy's eyes were red. She said, where is Yang Yi? I'll go accompany him. Chapter 375. Murphy could not enter the ancestral hall, not to mention that she was not listed in the Yang family tree. Even if she was, she could not enter the ancestral hall. The ancestral hall of the Yang family was quite open. Because of the heavy casualties in the war, Yang Chonggui was the only one left in the family. Therefore, Yang Chonggui had the final say in the rules. In the past, he did not allow Dong Yuer to enter the ancestral hall, saying that she could only enter once in her lifetime. Later, he could not dissuade his wife, so he reluctantly changed the rule that all the women in the family could enter the ancestral hall to worship the ancestors together during festivals. But now, Murphy could not enter the ancestral hall, and Yang Huan did not dare to secretly bring Murphy in. If the old man saw it, Yang Huan would be beaten up. What should he do? Yang Huan rolled his eyes and said with a sly smile, "Got it. Follow me." Yang Yi knelt in the gloomy ancestral hall. The cold wind of the night kept coming in through the crack of the door. Fortunately, his body was strong and he was not afraid of the cold. Therefore, he calmly knelt down. In his mind, he was still criticizing the tradition and ignorance of his old man. He felt that the saying eccentricity is natural in the ancestral teachings could be applied to his old man. Of course, he was just criticizing Yang Chonggui's way of doing things. Yang Yi had already figured out the reason why Yang Chonggui blamed him. He realized his mistake. Someone once said, "The essence of a person is not an abstract thing inherent in a single person. In reality, it is the sum of all social relationships." After all, he was still living in this world. He could not turn a deaf ear to social customs just because of his casual attitude. He was also a man with a family. Even if he looked down on the binding force of the certificate, he should know the significance of the promise to Murphy. In the quiet ancestral hall, Yang Yi thought a lot. However, the silence was soon broken. A faint rustling sound came into Yang Yi's ears. In the dim and quiet ancestral hall, it was very loud. Yang Yi frowned and looked over. His hearing and eyesight were very good, so he quickly found the source of the sound. Then he saw a pair of eyes in a ventilation hole in the corner. The eye blinked and then retreated. "Sister-in-law, look, big brother is inside." Young Huan's voice was heard. After a while, a pair of familiar eyes appeared at the entrance of the cave. It was Murphy's. Yang Yi recognized her immediately and saw her sad expression when she saw him kneeling there. "Murphy, it's not a big deal. I'll stay for another half an hour or so. You should go back quickly. It's cold outside." Yang Yi spoke before she could. Murphy heard it. Although it was a little fuzzy outside, she heard the second half very clearly. She pursed her lips and stubbornly said, "No, I want to accompany you." "Why are you accompanying me? I'm not cold inside, but you'll freeze outside. Fool, listen to me." "I don't want to listen to you. I don't want to see you being punished for me." Murphy finally held back her tears and talked back. "I'm not being punished. In our family, it's normal to be punished. If you don't believe me, ask Huan Huan. Do Yang Qing and I get punished often?" Yang Yi coaxed her. Yang Huan also pulled Murphy and said, "Yes, it's only an hour. It's okay. Let's not wait here. Otherwise, when my father comes back, things will be worse." Murphy was persuaded to leave by Yang Yi. However, she did not go back peacefully. Instead, she went upstairs to get a coat for Yang Yi and asked Yang Qing to bring it to him. Then she went to find Dong Yue. Although she was a little nervous without Yang Yi, she still plucked up the courage to tell Dong Yue about her and Yang Yi's current work situation. She explained why they were not married yet, and wanted Dong Yue to help her reconcile. At this time, she still did not understand what had just happened. She ran over, held her mom's hand and asked, "Mom, where is Papa?" Now that it was dark outside the big house and she couldn't see anything clearly, Cece was a little scared and didn't dare to explore the courtyard again. However, her parents weren't playing with her, and her most adorable grandfather wasn't around either. The little girl finally felt bored. Murphy pulled Shishi into her arms, gently stroked her hair, and whispered, He has something to do now. He'll be back soon." But Dong Yue looked at Cece with a smile, and an idea came to her mind. She said to Mo Fei, "In fact, what I usually say has some effect. But now the old man is angry. He won't listen to anyone. It's useless for me to persuade him. If he makes Tai Zi kneel until dawn, he will not recognize his family. But I think there is one person who may be useful to persuade him." "Oh?" Murphy asked anxiously, like a drowning person grasping at a straw. "Little Yangshi," Dong Yue said with a smile. After a while, Yang Chonggui came back slowly with his hands behind his back. He was not in a hurry to talk to Yang Yi in the ancestral hall. Instead, he went back to the hall and saw Dong Yue. He ordered, "Yue, pour me a cup of tea." But as soon as he sat down in the armchair, a little girl walked over with a teacup. "Grandpa, I'll give it to you. Have some tea." Shishi's clear voice came before she arrived. "Io, put it down. Give it to Grandpa. Why are you serving Grandpa tea? What if it's hot?" Yang Chonggui looked anxious. Before he could even warm his seat, he hurriedly got up and went to greet his granddaughter. He took the teacup from her hands and scolded her. It's not hot." Shishi smiled sweetly at Grandpa. Young Chonggui touched the edge of the cup. He had a rough idea. He took a sip and put it down. It was not hot. The tea was warm. It seemed that someone had already prepared it. It's not hot. This is a porcelain cup. If it falls, it will hit your foot or cut your foot. Young Chonggui picked up Shishi and sat on the armchair. Although he was talking to his granddaughter, everyone knew who he was talking about. Grandpa, Grandma said that you locked up my papa. Shishi pouted and said, Grandpa, don't be angry, okay? My papa is not a bad guy. Oh, Shishi said while shaking Yang Chonggui's hand. Even if Yang Chonggui had a heart of stone, he would not be able to resist such a childish act. But your father didn't do something well, so Grandpa is angry. Yang Chonggui explained. But don't lock him up, okay? I'm scared. Shishi said sadly. Papa is disobedient. I'll ask him to apologize to you, okay? Papa said that if you know your mistakes, you're a good child. Don't be angry, okay? The little girl's voice was soft, and Yang Chonggui didn't know how to deal with her. He couldn't harden his heart to Shishi, and after being coaxed by his granddaughter, his anger had already dissipated. Okay. I won't punish your father. Young Shi, don't cry. Grandpa promises you that your father will come back immediately. Young Chonggui saw that Shishi's eyes were red and quickly said, Really? Shishi held back her tears and looked at her grandfather in surprise. Of course, Grandpa's words are a gentleman's words. Grandpa will ask your father to come back now. Young Chonggui looked at his granddaughter's surprised eyes and immediately patted his chest and said heroically, Grandpa, you're so nice. Shishi leaned over and kissed her grandfather on the cheek. At this moment, Yang Chonggui, who was still a little stiff, couldn't hold on anymore. He revealed a smile, and the wrinkles on his face were like blooming flowers. They had never been so wonderful. Chapter 376. Creak. The door of the ancestral hall was opened, and Yang Chonggui walked in slowly. You have a good daughter. Yang Chonggui pretended not to see the clothes on Yang Yi's body. He snorted and said, Get up. Yang Yi slowly got up from the ground. After kneeling for an hour, his knees were a little sore. With a thought, a warm current gushed out from his dantian and hit the blood vessels there. The soreness immediately dissipated. Daughter? Yang Yi was a little confused. Did Shishi do something? Yang Chonggui ignored him and took care of the altar. After a while, he said slowly, Do you know why I asked you to kneel? Yang Yi was silent for a while and said softly, Lack of responsibility. That's one reason. Yang Chonggui took out a few incense sticks, put them on the kerosene lamp and lit them. There's another reason. Now that you've made a lot of money, you can't call home as much as when you were in the army. The old man's intuition was very accurate. Although he didn't suspect whether his eldest son's identity had changed, he could sense that Yang Yi maintained an inexplicable distance from home, and this place despite his seemingly friendly appearance. How could he not be estranged? This guy was not the real Yang Yi. Yang Chonggui was more talkative now. You can't forget your ancestors. No matter how much money you make, you can't go against your conscience. You can't forget that you're a descendant of the Yang family. Our Yang family has been loyal for generations. We shed our blood for the country and the people, and we repay our neighbors. We support each other. I want you to kneel in front of your ancestors, because I want you to calm down. Whether it's your wife, your children, your parents, your siblings, or your neighbors who have received kindness from you. No matter how much money you earn, you cannot forget your roots. I understand. Looking at his father's back, Yang Yi pondered for a moment before slowly nodding his head. You haven't been back for 2 years. Yang Chonggui finally turned around and looked at him. He handed over the lit incense and said slowly, Burn some incense for your ancestors. Yang Yi returned and appeared in front of Murphy and Shishi. As usual, he had a gentle smile on his face, as if kneeling for almost an hour did not affect him at all. Papa, you're back? Shishi happily threw herself into her father's arms and said happily, I told Grandpa not to lock Papa up. Papa knows his mistakes and changes. He's a good kid, so Grandpa won't be angry anymore. Shishi is very good today. She's very sensible, Murphy said to Yang-yi as she walked over and gently stroked the little girl's hair. Thank you, Shishi. Thank you for your help. Yang-yi kissed his daughter's face, making her giggle. It was late at night. Yang-yi carried Shishi and took Murphy upstairs. As soon as they turned on the light and entered the room, Yang-yi could not wait to free one of his hands and gently held Murphy's soft hand. He looked at Murphy's sparkling eyes softly and said, "You've been wrong tonight. In fact, it's my fault." Yang-yi knew that Murphy must have done something behind his back. Otherwise, Shishi would not have run to her father. Don't say it again. Murphy reached out to cover Yang-yi's mouth and said, "It's my fault. Are you done?" Shishi looked at her mother's posture, and her eyes lit up. It seemed that she had unlocked a new movement. "No, I want to say that I didn't think it through before. My father scolded me, and he was right." Yang-yi pulled her hand down and said seriously, "Now, I want to tell you that I want to marry you." Murphy was stunned. The impact of this sentence on her was no less than that of Yang-yi's confession that day. Although she didn't doubt that Yang-yi would marry her, and their relationship had reached a point where success was inevitable, what woman didn't look forward to hearing this sentence from the person she loved? But at this time? I'm serious. Although it's a bit rushed, I understand that I can no longer stay out of this matter. I have to be responsible for you. So, I want to tell you that I want to marry you. This is not a proposal. In the future, I will give you a proposal ceremony, a romantic proposal ceremony. Now, I just want to tell you my promise." Yang-yi looked into Murphy's eyes and said firmly. However, Yang-yi, this honest boy, still did not understand. If this is not a proposal, what else can it be? He has already made his statement so clear, but Murphy still has to respond. Wasn't this a proposal? Yang-yi knew that it was rushed, but it was not just rushed. No one had ever proposed in such a clumsy and simple way. Just a moment ago, he was being punished to kneel in the ancestral hall. Now he came up and said such words. In this simple room, there were no roses, no diamond ring, and he was hugging Shishi. Indeed, Shishi was as beautiful as a flower, but she was not a flower after all. Cece blinked. She didn't quite understand. She tilted her little head and looked at her father and mother for a while. However, although she was still being hugged by her father and mother did not care about her. In their eyes, there was only each other. Shishi was pitifully ignored. Murphy was also a little confused. Happiness and panic mixed together, and she felt that her IQ was not enough. She was not mentally prepared at all. She would not have thought that Yang-yi would suddenly say this. She was a little flustered and said, I know, I am very happy. I did not care about the ceremony. Actually, it was impossible not to care? Which woman had not fantasized about it when she was young? It was a romantic occasion like a garden in full bloom. Her lover dressed up like a handsome prince, then got down on one knee and proposed to her. But now, there was nothing, not even a kneel, and Yang-yi said so domineeringly, I want to marry you. Murphy was so flustered that she forgot her beautiful fantasies, and her mind went blank. There will definitely be a ceremony. I will make it up to you when I propose. Yang-yi did not feel that he was proposing and said seriously to Murphy. No matter what other people thought, Yang-yi had to accept this. In the future, he would give Mo-fei what he thought was romantic. However, Murphy did not know what to do and could only nod shyly. One did not play by the rules, the other did not have a brain. Both of them were the best, and they just happened to be a couple. The two of them stood there for a while, looking at each other with surging emotions in their eyes. They did not know what to say, but that was not important. Papa, I want to take a bath. I have not taken a bath for 2 days, and I am going to become smelly. Shishi, who was ignored, finally could not bear it. She pouted her small mouth and cried out, Oh, yes, I will give you a bath. Yang-yi quickly put Shishi down and said, Take the clothes, the water is boiling downstairs, and you can take a bath in the bathroom downstairs. Yang-yi said to Murphy apologetically, The conditions at home are not good, and there is no water heater, so I can only boil water to take a bath. Sorry for the inconvenience. No, I am fine. Murphy's eyes still had a little shyness. She was in high spirits. She maintained a strong curiosity about new things. When her father took the clothes for her, she walked around her father and asked, "Papa, what is it like to take a bath in boiling water? Do you want to put Shishi in a big pot, and then burn a big fire?" "That is to cook you." Yang Yi heard this and laughed. "Did you see the chicken soup tonight? If you cook it like that, you will be cooked." "Then don't cook Shishi. I am not delicious." The little girl hurriedly waved her hand. When it was time to sleep, Murphy finally recovered from the dizziness. She stretched out her finger, poked Yang Yi's waist and muttered, "Actually, you don't have to be so anxious." Yang Yi put down the book in his hand and turned to look at Murphy, whose skin was particularly smooth after taking a bath. "I have explained to Mom that because of my work, we can't disclose our relationship for the time being, but we will do it as soon as possible, so as not to let Mom wait too long." In fact, Murphy had already thought about it. When she terminated the contract with Tianmei, she would officially disclose her relationship with Yang Yi, and also introduce her in Yang Yi's studio. Mom also expressed her understanding. She said that we have been delayed for 4 or 5 years, so it doesn't matter if we wait a little longer. When we can really make it public, we will go back to the village and hold a grand wedding, Murphy said with some shyness. "Well, but it doesn't matter. I just want to tell you that I have made up my mind." Yang Yi laughed. "No, you scared me. You bad guy, you suddenly proposed to me." Murphy rebuked and hammered Yang Yi's chest. "Who proposes like this? It's not a proposal. I said that I will give you a proposal ceremony in the future." Yang Yi complained. "It's a proposal. You forced me to express my opinion," Murphy said with a pout. "Then you agree?" Yang Yi asked with a smirk. No, I want you to give me a super romantic proposal, or I will be unhappy." Murphy turned her head on the pillow. Fortunately, Shishi was sleeping soundly, otherwise she might have been woken up. There will be. Yang Yi held her in his arms and didn't let her move. Then, he lovingly kissed her forehead and said with a smile full of love, "Umph." Murphy hummed like a piglet. After a while, she leaned on Yang Yi's arms and whispered, But we can still get the certificate first. Mom secretly told me that the wedding ceremony can be made up later, but we can't be together like this." Yang Yi didn't know that his mother loved this stupid daughter-in-law, and was worried that Yang Yi would change his mind, like his father, and change sides. Chapter 377. On the second day after returning home, Yang Yi still followed his own schedule. He woke up early and ran 2 laps around the village. However, it was different from the city. The people in the village woke up very early. During the first lap, the sky was blue and the roosters were crowing. Some people had already started to move around. After running the second lap, many people had already started to draw water from the well. When they saw Yang Yi running past, those who knew him even greeted him. Finally, when he passed by the martial arts practice field, Yang Yi was surprised to see that his old man was training a group of young men in their teens to 20s. Hum, a scene in full swing. Young Chongwei was wearing a short jacket in the middle of winter. He led them in front, and taught them move by move. Although he was not monitoring them, those young men who were usually naughty did not slack off. Every punch was very serious. Wasn't the school holidays already? However, Yang Yi soon felt relieved. He remembered that when the old man trained the 3 of them, they also trained in winter and summer. However, Yang Yi ran home and woke Shishi up. He took a tree branch and asked her to practice swordsmanship with him. Not long after, young Chongwei returned. When the old man saw his precious granddaughter practicing the horse stance and waving the tree branch with a straight face, he immediately jumped up. "You rascal, what are you doing?" Young Chongwei stared at him with his eyes wide open. He took the horsewhip hanging from the tree beside him, and swung it in the air with a loud bang. Yang Yi was shocked and quickly stood in front of his daughter. Without waiting for Yang Yi's reply, Yang Chongwei reprimanded him bitterly. "Yang, she is still so young and you're letting her practice martial arts. Isn't this ruining the child? Yang Shi, come here. Grandpa is here. In the future, if your father forces you to practice martial arts again, Tell Grandpa to beat him up. She poked her head out from behind her father's butt. She blinked and asked in confusion, Grandpa, I'm 4 years old. The little girl thought that her grandfather was asking about her age. Even 4 years old won't do. How can a girl practice martial arts so early? Boys could only start practicing martial arts after they were 5 years old. Girls would have to wait until they were at least 6 years old. Yang Yi's body hasn't even fully recovered yet, and you're already making her do the horse stance. What if she grows into bow-legged in the future? Yang Chonggui pushed Yang Yi away and carried Shishi up with heartache. Yang Huan, who was helping Yang Qing draw water from the well, curled her lips and whispered to Yang Qing, Second brother, I remember that when father taught me martial arts, I was 5 years old, right? Why did you arrest me so early in the morning? Yang Yi responded with a wry smile. He was a taciturn person and spoke even less than Yang Chonggui. He was comparable to Yang Yi in the past. I can only start practicing martial arts at the age of 5? Who set the rules? Yang Yi asked with some doubt. In his previous life he had been fighting with the Grim Reaper ever since he could remember, constantly learning and killing. The rules set by our ancestors. Yang Chonggui pinched his granddaughter's calf and casually brushed Yang Yi off. He then asked with concern, Does it hurt? Yang Shi. It doesn't hurt. I'm used to it. Grandpa, what's bow-legged? Shishi giggled. It's like this. Yang Chonggui put Shishi down and spread his legs, arching them like a crab as he walked wobbly. Hee Grandpa, you're so funny. The little girl was amused. She also learned from Grandpa and walked with bow-legged like a crab. Yang Shi, yes, that's right. You can't learn martial arts like your father in the future. You have to wait until you're 5 or 7 years old. Yang Chonggui reminded. After playing with Grandpa for a while, Shishi skipped to the kitchen and reported to her mother what Grandpa had just done. Yang Chonggui then turned to look at Yang Yi. His scrutinizing gaze made Yang Yi's hair stand. Wasn't it just a mistake to let Shishi start practicing martial arts too early? Couldn't she just admit her mistake and change? Yang Yi felt that his grandfather was making a mountain out of a molehill. I saw you running outside the village this morning. Yang Chonggui finally opened his mouth. Yes. Yang Yi froze for a moment and nodded. All these years, your martial arts haven't fallen behind? Yang Chonggui asked. My fists never leave my hands, and my music never leaves my mouth. Yang Chonggui showed a trace of relief. It turned out that he wasn't still hung up on the matter just now. The old man began to take off his cotton-padded jacket, revealing the coarse cloth on his upper body. He slowly said, We haven't sparred for 2 years, right? Come, let me see if you're talking nonsense. Yang Yi was a little hesitant. He hesitated and said, Dad, you're old. What, you still look down on your dad? Yang Chonggui snorted. I taught you this martial arts. Let me tell you, no matter how old your dad is, he's still your dad. I can beat you up without a problem. Yang Yi was silent, although he couldn't help but complain in his heart. If you weren't my dad, I could beat 10 of you without a problem. But after Yang Chonggui finished speaking, he bent his body into a fist and got into a fighting stance. Don't say, the old man's move really had a little of the natural feeling of a master. The chi sank down and vaguely gave Yang Yi a little pressure. Yang Yi couldn't help but let go of the idea of underestimating him. At this time, he also remembered that his grandfather was indeed very strong. In the past 10 years, as Yang Chonggui's hair turned white and he grew older, every time Yang Yi went home, he didn't dare to use his full strength when sparring with the old man. But even before this, when he really didn't hold back when sparring with the old man, the young and strong Yang Yi couldn't beat Yang Chonggui, who was already more than 50 years old at that time. Moreover, in these 30 years, Yang Yi didn't seem to have seen Yang Chonggui use all his martial arts. How strong was he? Yang Yi started to be curious. Therefore, Yang Yi didn't hesitate anymore. Hua hua. The wind from the fist and the force from the torn clothes made explosive sounds. He also bent his body into a fist and got into a fighting stance that was exactly the same as Yang Chonggui's. Hongquan. This was the real martial arts that Yang Chonggui taught the three of them. It was a real lethal martial arts. It was still a little different from what he taught the kids in the training field. Yang Qing and Yang Huan, who were fetching water, couldn't help but stop what they were doing. Brother, who do you think is stronger between Big Brother and Dad? Yang Huan couldn't help but ask. Dad is stronger, right? Yang Qing hesitated and said with a bitter smile. I can't even beat him now. But Big Brother isn't bad either. I heard from a soldier that Big Brother is very strong. Tens of thousands of people in the army aren't as strong as Big Brother, Yang Huan whispered. Of course, the soldier was Guo Debao who tied her up back then. Yang Qing didn't say anything. He felt that he didn't have enough information and didn't know how to judge. However, in the yard, Yang Yi and Yang Chongwei had already started fighting. Yang Yi, who had underestimated Yang Chongwei before, immediately suffered. Da-da-bang! With just a few simple moves, Yang Chongwei blocked Yang Yi's fists. Seizing the moment when Yang Yi was exposed, Yang Chongwei punched Yang Yi's chest. Yang Yi took 2 steps back. He touched his arm and looked at the old man in surprise. The last punch on his chest was deflected by Yang Chongwei, so it didn't hurt or itch. However, Yang Yi could clearly feel the strength of the old man's fists when he blocked the other 2 punches. It was very heavy and much stronger than Guo Debao. Yang Yi's arm was a little numb. This was not the most important thing. What surprised Yang Yi was that the old man broke through his defense so quickly. Every punch was just right, as if the old man had guessed his moves, which made him feel very uncomfortable. Although they were both using Hong Quan, Yang Chongwei was really like a grandmaster boxer. The truth was simple, and no move was better than a move. He couldn't lose to Yang Chongwei, who was almost 70 years old. It was one thing to pretend to lose to him, but if he really lost without any resistance, Yang Yi would be so embarrassed that he would find a hole to hide in. Chapter 378. The more serious he was, the more frightened Yang Yi was. Even though Yang Yi had used all his strength, he could not shake Yang Chongwei at all. Yang Chongwei was like an old tree with roots and was as steady as Mount Tai. Even though Yang Yi was no longer playing around, and was as agile as a dragon swimming in the water, and as agile as a butterfly, the old man's natural punches were able to block all of Yang Yi's attacks. On the other hand, the old man's casual and sudden attacks were always so unexpected. Moreover, they hit when Yang Yi's attacks were at their fiercest, causing him to hurriedly withdraw his moves and be exhausted from parrying. It was very uncomfortable. After a few rounds, the old man with white hair was still breathing steadily. He was as steady as a mountain, like a grandmaster. Was this the same old man who was always so rustic? Previously, Yang Yi did not think much of the memory of his predecessor. He felt that it was not the old man who was too strong, but his predecessor who was too weak. But now, it seemed that Yang Chongwei's kung fu was indeed unfathomable. While he was surprised by Yang Chongwei's kung fu, Yang Qing and Yang Huan's jaws dropped to the ground. Yang Qing had no idea that Yang Yi was so strong, and so was Yang Huan. These 2 guys were not as obsessed with martial arts as Yang Yi, so even Yang Qing was not as good as the old Yang Yi. But he knew that his father's kung fu was very strong. It was just that he did not expect that his elder brother could be so close to the old man. It seemed that his kung fu had improved a lot over the years. Yang Huan was also shocked by his father's vigor. His father was almost 70 years old, but he was still so strong? It was not scientific. The commotion caused by the fight in the courtyard attracted the attention of the 3 people in the kitchen. Cece skipped and ran in front, but when she looked up, she saw her grandfather and father tangled together. Ah, Papa and Grandpa are fighting. The little girl was a little anxious. She turned around and pulled her mom's hand. She pursed her lips and said sadly, Mom, Papa and Grandpa are fighting. Quickly tell them not to fight. Dong Yue, on the other hand, was very calm. She walked up and patted the flour on her hands as she smiled and said to Shishi, Little Yangshi, don't worry. They're not fighting. They're just playing around and practicing martial arts. Shishi blinked her big eyes and asked doubtfully, Is it the same as Papa and those uncles? Papa and Uncle Shen also fought, but it wasn't a fight. Dong Yue didn't quite understand what the little fellow was talking about. She could only nod with a smile. At this moment, the situation on the battlefield changed. Having met his match, Yang Yi, the martial arts maniac, was also excited. In order to find out his father's true strength, he decided to use his secret weapon, internal energy. Qi sank into his dantian, and several warm currents flowed into his limbs and bones. Yang Yi's strength suddenly increased. With a shake of his forearm, he shook off Yang Chonggui's hand, and then punched out. Yang Chonggui parried in time. His arms blocked Yang Yi's powerful punch, but he was forced to take 2 steps back. "Stop!" Yang Chonggui shouted, and jumped out of the circle. The old man was slightly panting, but he also stared at Yang Yi with his eyes wide open. His brows gradually wrinkled. Yang Yi withdrew his hand and gradually calmed down. After calming down, he began to break out in a cold sweat. He was extremely embarrassed. Really, how old had he been? Why was he still competing with an old man who was almost 70 years old? Did he have to use his internal energy to win this fight? If word got out, wouldn't he be laughed to death by his brothers? However, Yang Chonggui didn't stare because he couldn't withstand Yang Yi's attack. He stepped forward, grabbed Yang Yi's right hand, and put 2 fingers on Yang Yi's pulse. Yang Yi was confused at first, but soon felt a subtle warm current flowing into his meridians. However, it was an external force after all. The warm current in Yang Yi's body almost subconsciously moved immediately, sweeping away the foreign object and forcibly driving it out. Yang Yi's fingers were shaken off, but he had already gotten the information he wanted. The old man stared at Yang Yi with his eyes wide open. "Where did you learn this?" It turned out that when Yang Yi's strength suddenly increased, the old man noticed something was wrong. However, at this moment, Yang Yi also opened his eyes wide and looked at his father in disbelief. How could it be? How could the old man know internal energy? In his memory, his father was just an ordinary martial artist who practiced martial arts. What his father taught the 3 of them was only the Hong Fist. For 30 years, Yang Yi had never seen Yang Chonggui use his internal energy, not even once. He didn't even mention it. However, this also solved Yang Yi's doubts. Previously, he couldn't understand why his father was so strong at such an old age. It turned out that there was an increase in internal energy. Of course, Yang Yi also knew that even in his previous life, people who knew how to use internal energy were extremely rare. This was not something that could be learned just because one wanted to. One needed to be extremely talented and had to have an inheritance. Generally, it wasn't passed to outsiders. Yang Yi also coincidentally obtained the legacy of an old man. There probably weren't many experts in this world, and they were either hidden in the marketplace or living high up in the imperial court as bodyguards. Otherwise, the experts in the army that Yang Yi saw wouldn't just be at the level of Shinsenyu. Now the old man actually showed him such a skill. The people around him were actually experts hidden in the marketplace? Yang Yi was dumbfounded. Yang Chonggui looked around and pulled Yang Yi to the back of the ancestral hall to talk. In the yard, Shishi was confused. She couldn't help but pull her grandmother's hand and asked, "Grandma, are Papa and Grandpa not fighting anymore?" "Well, I don't know what they are whispering about. Just ignore them," Dong Yue said with a smile. "Come, Grandma will take you to see them." Sure. Cece's interest was piqued. Dong Yue grabbed a handful of grains and came to the courtyard. She pecked a few times and immediately, chickens flew and ducks jumped in the courtyard. The chickens and ducks that were strolling around flapped their wings and ran over. Wow. Grandma is so awesome. Shishi's eyes were wide open. On this side, Yang Chonggui was still questioning Yang Yi with a serious face. Yang Yi had to make up a reason. "It's like this. A few years ago, I just retired from the army. At that time, I was working in a restaurant and met an old beggar with a white beard. This reason was used in the novels in his previous life. But thanks to these tricks, Yang Yi made up a very detailed story and convinced Yang Chonggui." Yang Chonggui stroked his beard and said solemnly, "In that case, you also learned this skill by chance." Yang Yi nodded and couldn't help but ask, "Dad, how do you know internal strength? Why have I never seen you use it before? And why don't you teach us? I'm your son." Yang Chonggui sighed, shook his head and said, "I can't teach you. I used to promise my master that I would take this skill to my grave and never pass it on. Because this is their family's secret." Although during those years of war, There was no news of their family, and they must have met with misfortune. But a man can't go back on his word. A man must do what he says. I have kept this secret for decades. Yang Chongwei sighed. Otherwise, why would he be so serious just now? He thought that Yang Yi had secretly learned it from him. Yang Yi didn't have the intention to learn it. He smiled and said, "That's okay. Anyway, I also know a set of internal strength, and it may not be worse than yours, Dad." "Humph, you want to compare yourself with your dad? If it was a few decades ago, I could have pressed you down with a finger. Back then." Yang Chonggui's words stopped abruptly. Yang Yi didn't ignore it and frowned slightly. He suddenly felt that his father was indeed a little mysterious. Recalling those memories, he seemed to have never told him, Yang Qing, and Yang Huan about his past. "Dad, what did you go through back then?" Yang Yi couldn't help but ask. "It's been so many years. Can't you tell me?" Yang Chonggui stared at Yang Yi for a long time. After a long time, he said slowly, "Do you really want to know?" Chapter 379. This question was obviously asked while knowing the answer. Yang Yi was already bursting with curiosity. Yang Chonggui sighed after seeing Yang Yi's nod. "I originally wanted to tell you about these things when I was about to die, or even bring them into the coffin. But now you have grown up and have your own children. Sooner or later, you will become the clan master of the Yang clan, so you should know a few things. Could it be a secret story? Come with me." Yang Chonggui opened the door of the ancestral hall and brought Yang Yi in before closing the door. "I once told you 3 siblings that our Yang family has been loyal for generations." Yang Chonggui stood in front of the altar and cupped his hands. He looked up at the tablet on the altar and said slowly, "Do you still remember?" How could he just remember? He used to talk about it often. When Yang Yi came back, he had said it so many times that his ears were getting calluses. "Dad, aren't you just making up stories to fool us?" Yang Yi couldn't help but ask the question that his predecessor, Yang Qing, and Yang Huan had been harboring. If what Yang Chonggui said was true, the Yang family had so many great generals in the previous dynasty. Why were they so miserable in the old master's generation? Moreover, looking at these memorial tablets, although they had been smoking for a few years, Yang Yi found them in his memory. 20 years ago, these memorial tablets were still very new. They were obviously made by Yang Chonggui. Besides, no matter how good Yang Chonggui was, Yang Yi didn't think that he had participated in the previous wars. The timing didn't match. The old master should have been born in the flames of war. When he had just grown up and had some ability, the war had already ended. Where did the enemy come from for him to kill? However, Yang Yi's questioning made Yang Chonggui very unhappy. He fumed and glared at him. "Made it up? How can I make up stories about my ancestors? If I made it up, how can I face my ancestors in the afterlife?" That was true. No one would like to make up a father or a grandfather for themselves. Yang Yi closed his mouth and listened to Yang Chonggui's story. The Yang clan was indeed the descendant of a general. It could even be said that the entire Yang clan was a famous military clan in the previous dynasty. It was stationed in the Min province and the Jiangnan area. Under the emperor's orders, it recruited and trained soldiers to resist the Japanese invaders from the sea. What Yang Yi said was right. Almost every generation of Yang family head had sacrificed themselves on the battlefield to protect their country. The Yang family army was just like the Qi family army in Yang Yi's previous life. They were famous in history, and the Japanese invaders were even more fearful of them. Moreover, compared to Qi Jiguang, the Yang clan's legacy was even longer. Until the end of the previous dynasty, the Yang clan had a history of over 200 years. Speaking of that history, Yang Chonggui's face was full of glory. He even proudly said, "If you go to Jiangnan or Min province, you can still see the statues of our ancestors and the ruins of the ancestral hall." But after that, Yang Chonggui stopped smiling. Later on, the country fell into enemy hands. All sorts of Russians, Japanese, and red-haired wanted a piece of the pie. With the country in danger, your great-grandfather, who is also my grandfather, brought his relatives and former subordinates to join the Southern Army and continued to fight against the Japanese. At that time, the Chinese army was still stuck in the consciousness of the past. They fought valiantly and fearlessly. They didn't understand that they would just raise their swords and charge forward. However, the Japanese army had already entered the era of firearms. The Yang family army couldn't adapt and suffered heavy casualties. After a few big battles, there weren't many people left. Yang Yi's great-grandfather was very skilled, but he couldn't withstand a bullet. In the later stages of the war, Yang Chonggui's father, who was also Yang Yi's grandfather, finally used a gun. He and the remaining men of the Yang family once again entered the extremely tragic all-out war to reclaim the country. The rise and fall of the country is the responsibility of every man, Yang Chonggui said solemnly. Yang Yi didn't know why, but he also had tears in his eyes. It wasn't something he could control. It was a surge of true emotion that came from the depths of his bones. Yang Yi's grandfather became a small general. Of course, it was far from the status of the Yang family army back then. However, in local wars, the guerrilla force led by Yang Yi's grandfather was like Li Yunlong's independent regiment. They appeared and disappeared unpredictably, beating the Japanese until they cried for their parents. When it comes to fighting the Japanese, no one has as much experience as our Yang family. These 200 years of fighting the Japanese weren't for nothing, Yang Chonggui said proudly. However, war was unpredictable. No one knew what changes would happen. It was very similar to what was written in Yang Yi's novel. His grandfather's army was attacked by the Japanese's elite forces. In order to get rid of Grandfather Yang, the Japanese in the central China battlefield sent out a special force. Grandfather Yang wasn't as lucky as Li Yunlong. His entire army was wiped out. Although he sacrificed himself generously, his corpse was found by the Japanese and hung on the city wall to deter the other Chinese troops. The Japanese didn't know that this had instead aroused the bloodlust of the Chinese troops. 2 months later, the Japanese at this station were besieged and annihilated. Speaking of this, Yang Chonggui gave Yang Yi a meaningful look. He had watched some of Drawing Sword. If it weren't for the fact that Grandfather Yang was ambushed during a field battle, and that the details were different, he would have suspected that Yang Yi knew something about it. Yang Yi also knew the direction of the war later. 3 years later, all the Japanese in mainland China were driven out. In the end, the Japanese surrendered unconditionally. After 100 years of humiliation, it finally came to an end. But, Dad, where were you in the whole story? Yang Yi could not help but ask. I was still young at that time. Yang Chonggui glared at Yang Yi. And my mother wouldn't let me go to the battlefield to avenge my father. She said that she wanted to leave an heir for the Yang family. Otherwise, how could I sit back and do nothing? Next was Yang Chonggui's story. Yang Chonggui was not able to go to the battlefield to kill the enemy, so he had to hold his breath and practice martial arts. He also met his benefactor in the crowd of people fleeing the war and learned internal strength. However, when he saw the list of Japanese war criminals who were not punished in the newspaper, there was a colonel in the special forces who killed his father. He later became a lieutenant general of a division commander. That guy didn't die? Yang Chonggui was furious. At that time, Yang Yi's grandmother had passed away. The last person who was in charge of Yang Chonggui had left. Yang Chonggui was like a wild horse that no one could stop. I borrowed Treasure Island and learned the Japanese language there for 2 years. After that, I stayed in the Japanese's hometown for a full 15 years. Yang Chonggui proudly said, in the past 15 years, I've killed every single one of the people on the list. I even set fire to that whatever club it was, and burned it down. You were the one who did that. Yang Yi took a deep breath. When he was rewriting Drawing Sword, he had checked a lot of history, and even a lot of unofficial secrets. He knew that something big happened to the Japanese after the war. Unlike his previous life, where the war criminals could still get away with it, the war criminals in this world died one by one. But that villain, that hero's name was Yang Jie, right? Yang Yi could not help but ask. Yang Jie. Motherf **, they can't even write my name wrong. Yang Chonggui snorted and said, your father used to be called Yang Jie. But after I returned to China, I changed my name. That name has been registered in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, so how can I still use it? It really was him. Yang Yi felt a little dizzy. He thought that he was quite awesome in his previous life, but he did not expect the old man to be even more awesome than he was. In 15 years, he turned the Japanese upside down with assassinations and even set fire to their place. Yang Yi wanted to kneel down before the old man when he saw that. It was too awesome. Yang Yi did not know if there would still be people who would not let it go after so many years. Yang Yi was also very cautious, especially now that he had Shishi and Murphy, these two people whom he wanted to protect for the rest of his life. Let this matter remain in the ancestral hall. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.